Stay Bold Radio. This is Cole Johnson opening for the show called U.S. Government Uses Child Porn to Entrap Citizens, Part 2, hosted by Kitty Wolf and Esther of the Caution Click crew. And we have just about everybody in the studio to get started. I'm going to bring Kitty Wolf in, the host for the evening. And Kitty, welcome to Stay Bold Radio.
Welcome, Cole. How's it going?
Doing well. The date is Sunday, February 16th, 2014. It's approximately 6:05 Eastern Standard Time in America. And I wanted to, before we go into the show, kind of reiterate some stuff from last episode. We learned about all these different stories of different kinds of stings involving child porn or other forms of entrapment, where most generally the FBI or some official government body is actually the supplier, which to me it seems like entrapment.
It is.
So,
it's not only entrapment, but it's entrapment, I think, on some of the worst levels, and especially when you look at the types of people that are apprehended by the different types of stings. You know, one of the things that we look at in law enforcement when you look at these type of things is you've got to look at intent. Was this something that this person intentionally did? And especially in this day and age where cyber crimes and hacking and all this are so prevalent, you've got to look at the intent. An example of not looking at the intent would be one of the pastor's cases where there were thousands and thousands of pictures, and they always inflate that up in the headline. So-and-so was found with 2,000 pictures of child pornography on their computer. You know, and to us that's, oh, my God, that's terrible, and the guy was a pastor. Well, you know, there's some common questions that they've learned in the years they've been operating these different types of stings, one of which is, do you have open Wi-Fi? The other of which is this a public access computer? Do other people use this computer other than you? In the beginning, early stages of not the government sting flicker that targeted the government computers, but the multi-morph names that came out of that, they honed their skills a little bit. You know, now it is commonplace if you're using a warrant and going into somebody's home, you already have a stack of information. But these are common questions that you ask now because of other cases that were won by the people that were supposedly doing this in court. And they've later found out, you know, that was an open Wi-Fi and it was actually the neighbor stealing Wi-Fi. Or on the case of the pastor's computer, it was an in-church computer that multiple people had access to. So how do you prove who did it? And the other thing that you look at is...
That sounds like a headline I heard locally here a few years back in Springfield. Was a pastor who was I don't know if he was the pastor. I take that back. I don't think he was a pastor, but he was an employee of the church and helped run the broadcasting portion, because it was one where they did a live show from the church, and it was being broadcast live, and I guess some of the people in there were fired for that. Having stuff on their computers. So it seems to be pretty prevalent. I don't mean to interrupt you too badly there, but I wanted to kind of report on the Part 1 episode. We got to share Andrew's story, Chris's story, Trey's story. We met a woman named Esther who shared her story, and so we're going to bring them in shortly, Esther and the Caution Click crew from cautionclick.com. I wanted to report to you, Kitty, that in getting out these stories and bringing awareness to these topics, we have had 170 listens to Part 1 episode on Blog Talk Radio, 171, and on YouTube we have 281 listens. So, yeah.
Well, I hope more and more people listen to it, because your government's not going to come to your school and do an adequate enough presentation. We figured that one out the hard way.
I think it's going to be a snowball effect. I think you've already solidified that snowball, and you've got it rolling downhill, and it's going to just build and build. And on that building, I'm going to bring Scott live on the line. Scott's with Kitty, and I'm going to bring Esther from Florida in to join the conversation. Hello, Esther. Welcome to Stable Radio.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me. I am actually a member of a group called Caution Click, which actually, we're a volunteer organization. With what we try to do is promote public safety, smarter legislation, and reform of these harsh sentences for child pornography, non-production child pornography offenders. We're actually trying to, strengthen our organization and make allies so that we're a little stronger as far as getting the government to have more evenly sentences among the child pornographers, and in other words, to differentiate the non-production child pornographers from the actual hands-on producers of child pornography. And I am sort of not one of the board members, but I did invite other members of the board, actually, of Caution Click. They should be on this call, and hopefully they will participate and listen to, what's going on here. I think it's very informative for all of us.
Okay. On that note, I see we have several people in the studio listening via phone, and if you are a member of Caution Click or have a story similar to what's being talked about that you want to share, all you have to do is press the number 1 button, and it will send a signal to me here in the studio that you want to say something. And, we have a hand up. Let's go ahead and see who that is. Hello, listener. You're live on Stable Radio.
Yes, this is Gail Coletta. I'm the president of Caution Click. Just wanted to let you know I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, Esther.
Hi.
And what's your name again?
Gail Coletta.
Gail. Okay. Thank you, Gail.
I'm glad you ladies made it.
I think Rita's on the call, too.
Hello, Rita.
We have one more caller that wants to join the conversation. Caller 716 area code. You're live on Stable Radio.
Okay. I'm also from Caution Click. This is Rita Finley.
Hi, Rita.
Hi.
Rita.
Okay. Hi, Rita.
Well, on the first episode, we learned about Kitty's story of Andrew, her nephew, who was looking for music. He clicked a download button for a song file, and a child pornographic image popped up. He deleted the image and thought he had made a mistake in downloading the song, that he had hit a wrong button, so he tried again. And the same image come up again, so he deleted it again and didn't think too much of it. And it wasn't until a year or so later that 5 different, agents are knocking at his door, seizing his computer, his mother's computer, all the technology in the home. And this boy is autistic. He was an autistic teenager with the mindset of a child and wasn't actively seeking those types of images and had come across them. And so now he is, Kitty and Andrew and Sue are all fighting that battle for him. And that's what sparked this show, was they wanted to tell Andrew's story. Along the way, we met Esther from your group, Caution Click, who shared her story as well. We heard stories of gentlemen from Florida who had been involved in Craigslist sting, where you had agents posing as people that they were not on Facebook to entrap young men via sex. And if you want to, not to put you on the spot, but Gail and Rita, if you had a story you'd like to tell about how you got involved in this fight against reformation of these laws.
Okay. Gail, did you want to go, or?
You can go first. Go ahead, dear.
My story is similar to many others. My son was on Facebook downloading, music and probably adult pornography. And along with it came child pornography. And he received an 8-year sentence for that. As far as willfulness, intent, none of that was proven. the fact that he had an open computer that was shared by many of his friends, none of that mattered when it came to sentencing.
And how many years ago was that?
It's almost 6 years now.
You're right. During that time period, it wasn't prevalent for them to ask. The Joint Task Force just did what we call the hit and raids. And one of the problems with that developed were the people that, did manage to get really good lawyers and question that in court. Show me the intent. Show me where it was an entrapment. Show me where the law enforcement task force has some accountability. And some of these cases were actually won. One of the famous cases is the firefighter, I believe he was out of San Francisco, that ended up, cost him his job and everything in 3 years of his life to get his name cleared to prove, that there was no intent. It was something that was tainted on the link that he had hit. As they began to lose certain cases, they would change the tactics. This is what I mean by morphed. It started off being one premise going before the Department of Justice to gain permission to do these types of stings, and that was in 2003 with the advent of Project Flicker. Okay, now they've used the same premise. They changed the names. Right now, according to Department of Justice, there's over 61 active forms of different types of stings going on. And that to me is utterly alarming, because if you call any parent of any teenage kid, you're going to say, well, are they teaching about this? This is alarming. What are you teaching? As we found out when Sue in Sullivan High School gave a little lecture through the REGS group, which is the group that is in charge of educating the public. That was one of the areas that they even failed to mention. They talked about, the typical things that we hear, don't put anything out there, kids. It's going to be out there forever. But they don't breach the subject at all with the children about this type of sting specifically. And there are thousands and thousands of children that have been convicted for hitting these things. Now, anytime you deal with a prepubescent teenager, you've got this puberty-stricken boy, and all of our idols are idols like Paris Hilton that has a sex tape out, and Kardashians that have sex tapes out. Our kids are sold sex at every single solitary turn. They really are. The days of the 1952 Norman Rockwell painting that, we all like to think we live in is no longer there. So if you're not arming your kids with the information that, hey, while you're on these social media sites, and it can be Facebook, it can be 4chan, it can be any type of social media site, they're constantly morphing the stings. But they all kind of go with one kind of basic guideline, and that basic guideline is the deliberate implantation of child pornography on sites that children go to. Okay, we know how many kids use Facebook. You're not supposed to unless you're 13, but I know for a fact that there's lots of ones a lot younger than that out there. There's no policing of the type of activity like that, not even by a lot of the parents. I don't know how many times I hear, we didn't know we were supposed to, talk about that with little Johnny. Well, we live in a world today where if you don't talk about it and you don't know, there's a good chance little Johnny is going to get hit up in this thing and not even know. And then a teenage boy looks at porn anyway, okay? The Internet is literally flooded. There is not a day that I don't get on that I don't see it somewhere, okay? So the boys are going to look. They're puberty-stricken teenage boys. That's part of the nature. It is not illegal for an adult to have adult porn in many states. I believe there's 2 that it is. But it is illegal for a teenager, a person under the age of 18, to possess adult porn. In fact, quite often when the forensic tech for the Joint Task Force dumps the computers, they not only look for their 2 stings or their hits where they have deliberately put the information out there and seen that it was hit by this IP address, but they'll quite often dump the whole complete hard drive and include that in the exploratory evidence to villainize the person that had it. Well, in a lot of cases lately, it could be a used computer. Okay? This computer was owned by Uncle Harry before I bought this computer. You know, Uncle Harry had some stuff on there that was okay for Uncle Harry to have because Uncle Harry was, 40-something. But when little Johnny bought the computer, little Johnny had no idea that Uncle Harry had this stuff on the computer. So little Johnny's going along, and he hits a link on LimeWire for a song. And you download, you've got to open it to get that song. So the minute you hit to open it, bingo. You are now a candidate to have that knock on your door, and you're going to have that knock on your door. And it can take up to a year. But little Johnny didn't know that Uncle Harry's stuff was on there. But that doesn't matter to the forensic tech. They're going to dump the whole complete entire hard drive, and then they're going to try to prove intent. That's why, the cases that are going before courts today, you've got to hire your own forensic tech to counteract what the FBI Sting and the Joint Task Force forensic tech put out there. And most of the people in the jury and most of the judges know not about these kind of things. They hear, the Charles Schultz peanuts. They hear that. When you start talking techie, my first response is, could you put it in English, please? The average person doesn't know this stuff. So it makes it really hard to prove these cases.
Kitty,
did the boy...
real quick, can I say also on something you said, the average jury and judge don't know these things. Believe it or not, the average jury and judge are just as computer illiterate as we are, and the children know more than them.
We're living in a world where the children have grown up with all of these devices, This is their world. They know more than the parents do. And other kids teach other kids,
Excuse me. This is Gail from Caution Click.
Hi, Gail.
Hi. Kitty, right? I want to make sure I have your name right. Kitty, yeah. You're hitting on so many different points. You're kind of all over the place. So I think you've made a lot of really good points, though, that if we could hone in on a couple of those things, we might be able to get some clarity and a discussion going. You started out with basically talking about the lack of information and the lack of education that we give to our children, if you will, or our young adults. If you look at the history of the child pornography, the viewing of child pornography, the typical child pornography viewer was a white male in his 40s, middle-aged white guy, typically a professional. That's who was originally the heaviest viewer of child pornography. Now with the availability, as you were talking about, of it being so prevalent on the Internet, so easy to get, that actually the fastest growing population of child pornography viewers are college students, are guys in college. What we have is a really systemic problem. There is a breakdown of morality in this country and what we idolize. I mean, if you look at what we have on television, you look at television, you have Honey Boo Boo, you have Toddlers and Tiaras. Toddlers and Tiaras is child pornography. It is sexualization of children. And you want to talk about sexual exploitation of a minor? There you go. You have it. It's primetime TV. This is, big news. We have so many. Lindsay Lohan, she's an icon. You've got the Kardashians.
Oh, God.
As you spoke about. Look at what Miley Cyrus has done. And this is
that
what our
one
young
makes me very
aspire.
angry.
Yeah, but you look at
she
this
started
is what our
off
young
a child star figure.
Yep. And this is what they aspire to. I spent a lot of my time talking to the legislature here, specifically in Florida. We're now expanding into D.C. with Caution Click being more of a national focus. But I will tell you, in having these one-on-one conversations with legislators, they do not believe it is their responsibility to educate the public. That's a parent's role, or that's a nonprofit organization. For example, what has been expressed to me is you see the billboards up and down the highway for abortion or drugs or guns or don't smoke.
Yep.
Those are put out by the Cancer Society. They're put out by they're not put out by the legislature. The legislature does not create curriculum. When you have something that you want to teach about drugs, these are organizations or these are special interest groups that will provide something to the to the school boards or to the PTAs or to any type of community organization, but it's not the legislature. So the legislature doesn't feel that it's their important, or they should mandate into the curriculum that we need to have as part of sex education, we need to have an anti-pornography, or what's good touch, bad touch. I mean, what's a good grade?
Well, actually, with some of the Common Core teachings, they are teaching, in my opinion, forms of pornography.
It is not their focus for most schools to talk about child pornography and how readily available it is on the Internet. And, in fact, the reason the name of our organization is Caution Click is it's exactly that. Be careful what you click on. It takes 5 clicks, and you've got child porn on your computer. And one of the biggest issues that we have is even if you were looking for legal pornography, if you're looking at teenage guys and you're looking at college-age guys, they do not use terms like man and woman. They're guys and girls. So even if they do a search and they put in there naked girls, hot, sexy girls, hot teens, anything like that, girl gets you a child, teen gets you a child. Even if they use the term babe, B-A-B-E, they will get a child. So pornography is so easy to get. But we're talking about stings here, and stings come in a lot of different
forms.
A lot of different forms. I got involved because my son was caught up in this. He was 21 at the time, bipolar, using LimeWire, saw some search terms, didn't know what they were, entered them into the computer, left it, went back, some stuff downloaded, he clicked, he looked at it, he saw, opened a couple of images, saw it was child pornography, had no interest, and just moved on. 2 weeks later, we had a SWAT team at our house. They were looking for me because the IP address was registered to me.
Right. They already have a file with all your info on it.
Correct, but they dragged when I screamed child pornography, are you crazy? My son went, oh, crap, it's on my computer. They locked him in a room. He wound up being arrested. He's doing 10 years prison, 15 years probation, and lifetime registration for images that all they could say is that the spyware software on our computer opened 49 images in 60 seconds, of which they said 30 were underage pornography. They all take plea deals because they're terrified. Very few go to trial. The attorneys are telling them, don't take this to trial. You want to plead, you want to plead, you want to plead. And I think many of the attorneys, especially back in 2009 when my son was arrested, they really were so uninformed on this issue, and they should have been very clear and said, you know what, I'm in over my head. You really need to get somebody that specializes in this. But
Absolutely.
They don't.
And they push the plea. They push the plea with fear and all kinds of other things.
They push the plea. Take the plea. Our attorney actually told my son not to take the plea, that he would do better if he pled open to the court because of his history of mental health issues, being bipolar, the fact that he was young, the fact that he had psychosexual evaluation, a risk assessment done, and polygraphs, and it showed there was absolutely no sexual deviance. There was no pattern of behavior. It was a one-time download. He didn't even go into all of the images. They said, don't worry, the judge is going to do the right thing. Well, the judge threw the book at him and gave him more than the prosecution was asking for. So it's interesting, and when you look at a lot of what they're doing with the Craigslist and whatnot, they're targeting guys, or even if they're on there and they're surfing the chat rooms, they're in adult chat rooms. They're in role-play chat rooms. So if you're really looking to catch somebody that has a deviant sexual interest in a minor, that is, then why are you not in chat rooms where children visit and see if there are any adults in there? Because then I'd say it's fair game. You have somebody that's actually in a child's chat room trying to solicit a minor. You have someone that's doing something illegal. But why are we creating situations that, but not to the efforts of law enforcement, no crime would have been committed?
If you want to make it even madder, let's look at the modern day that we sit in today. We have a wonderful thing that could be used as a wonderful tool, but it's not, and it's called the NSA. With this technology, they have the capability of knowing before it even hits the World Wide Web with their devices the certain types of imagery. Okay, they could program this thing to do this type of work instead of spying on chancellors in other countries. Okay, but then you get into a whole other issue of Internet censoring. But they aren't even using the technology that we have available to go after the people that are actually producing and sticking it out there. That makes me angry. Instead, you're spending trillions of dollars on these things, which by the time they hit your door, they've already spent all these hours and all this funding before they come with that warrant even to knock on your door. They've got a whole file with your name on it.
It's irresponsible use of taxpayer dollars. We're focusing on individuals that do not pose a risk to our communities. If you look at the research, and there are mountains and mountains and mountains of research, and basically they all come up saying the same thing. If you look at what the United States Sentencing Commission did 2 years ago, last year they released their 468-page report where they said, stop the presses, basically. We need to look at what we're doing here in the sentencing guidelines for child pornography.
Yeah, I read that.
We need to be separating them out. And that's what we at Caution Click, that's what we advocate for. We advocate and support evidence-based policies. Let's look at what the experts are telling us. Let's separate out those based on level of culpability and risk. We have the tools that we can do a risk assessment on someone, and we can identify who's at risk to the community and who is not. Child pornography possessors, pure possession, have about a 2% or less risk to ever have a hands-on offense, about a 3.6% risk to ever looking at child porn again, but a less than 2% risk of ever having a hands-on offense. And if you continue to read research, it will tell you that after 8 years, the risk factors are cut in half. So if we're starting out with a base of about 2% on a possessor only, after 8 years, his risk factor is less than 1%. Yet these are the guys that are getting the stiffest penalties, that we are spending the bulk of our resources on, that we are labeling them for life, and these are mostly professionals. I say, shame on us.
Not only that, but let's look at the number of children or persons with developmental disabilities to include autism spectrum disorder, and there's many different conditions under the spectrum. Okay? Let's look at the numbers of these individuals that are now sitting in prison for
getting no
something
treatment
they never were even taught or knew about. That, to me, just mind-boggling.
As a parent, I feel so guilty that somehow my son sitting there, this is my responsibility. This was my shortfall as a parent because I was unaware of the dangers lurking. I should
Most
have said
of us were. Do you know that they do get designated funding that is designated for the education of the public? That is designated funding. Let me tell you how they've been spending their designated funding. They've been spending this designated funding educating the officers involved in the sting. That's part of the regs group in Missouri. Now, we found all this out, and we haven't quit since the day that Andrew, got caught up in all this. So I wanted to know. Well, he didn't know. Okay, so who's responsible for teaching him? That very question. So I looked into the funding of the department, how they went before the DOJ, the presentation they gave, how they said they were going to spend the money, the amount of money that was allocated, and then I looked at the amount of money that was specifically designated funding for the education of the public. So I called them. And this is a year after Andrew had been arrested. I said, I want to interview you. I want to talk to you about this. This funding right here, this number right here says that you get this amount of funding. Oh, yeah, we do. We've been using that to educate the officers involved in the sting here locally in Missouri, but we're going to be in the schools next year. I said, okay, excuse me. Were you in the schools during these years? And I listed off the years that Andrew was in school. Well, no, we've been spending it educating the officers, but we're going to be there next year. The following year, Sue and
so they've misappropriated funds.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a misappropriation of funds.
Especially when it's designated for public education.
We actually, Caution Click, I personally sent the letter to the Attorney General and to the to the Attorney General and to the Postmaster General because the FBI has been operating child pornography sites. And if you believe that
I've
every
got
time
that in Andrew's room. There's 4 different sites where they actually busted the people on the sites, then actually ran them, one for, I believe, 2 months.
Yes, exactly. And that was the one. We went to them and we said we would like the FBI investigated and held accountable for the distribution and supporting of the distribution of child pornography, because these children, every time those images are viewed, these children are being violated and they are, again, abused. That's what they tell us. That's why the sentencing is so stiff. That's why there's an accountability. And with the letter that we got back, well, first of all, the Attorney General turned it over to the FBI to investigate themselves. And the FBI sent us back a letter and basically said, we can't comment on this because it's an ongoing investigation, but we're not using it for, I can't remember the exact wording, but basically we're not using it for that. We're using it differently. It's not like when we use drugs that we take from a sink, but we're using this to continue to, or was being used to continue to catch predators or something to that. It was, I can't remember the exact wording. I do have the letter, but it was so unbelievable. I have now tried to reach out to several attorneys because I think that we need to send a legal letter from an attorney.
Well, let me tell you what they did to cover their butts on that one. Okay, the Missing and Exploited Children puts a tag on all known cases. Every child that they come across with their picture has a Missing and Exploited Child tag.
Right.
What they have done is they say, with the blessings of the victims, because when we acquired on that, then an article came out a month later that described it to us, okay, after we got our standard letter on how they couldn't communicate with us. What it was one of the victims talking. It was a news article, one of the victims talking on how she was approached by the Joint Task Force Sting, and she gave them permission to use this because it's going to entrap other people that would deal in child pornography. Do you see the flaw in that? Here's the flaw in that.
Yes, absolutely. So she's so damaged by this. First of all, she's so damaged by this. Why is she allowing this to continue to be used? And why are they, quote, unquote, trying to entrap?
Exactly. This wasn't set up for them and for their use. It was for missing and exploited children to identify cases that were yet cleared.
The prison industry is the second largest industry, I think, or the third largest industry in this country behind oil and, I think prison. The prison industry is the second largest industry in this country.
Yeah, how those jobs working out for everybody, huh?
Yep.
How's that hope and change now?
Yep. I see, but I do see that we're moving toward a paradigm shift, because if you look at what they're doing out of the, and Holder was very instrumental in this, and he said, we need to examine laws that are not working. We need to, stop incarcerating America. There's a lot of different movements going on. End mass incarceration is one organization. There's another organization, Rita, I just went blank on it.
Families Against Mandatory Minimums?
Families Against Mandatory Minimums that are fighting at the federal level. I mean, there's a lot of organizations out there that are getting this momentum going. Their primary focus happens to be drugs, but if you look at, if you remember way back when, you had a couple of joints on you, you got arrested, and you were down for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and we had all the commercials
down for life,
Right, and you look at all of the, the advertising, the billboards, the commercials on TV with the fried eggs, this is your brains on drugs, and then, if you smoke marijuana, you're going to be a junkie. Well, we've all matured, and we recognize if you smoke a joint, it doesn't mean a junkie it makes. It's like saying everyone that has a drink is going to be an alcoholic. Everybody that reads a murder mystery is going to be a murderer. So, we're kind of maturing into that space. So I think, with all of this smart justice movement going on, and they're looking at the fact that we can use treatment, we can use rehabilitation, and they're really focused on this drug population right now. I see it here in Florida, huge. I just came from a 3-day summit, actually. But I do see a paradigm shift, but it is so slow to move the legislature, to move law enforcement. But right now, if it's an election year, they're going to target sex offenders because it's an easy thing for them to use to pound their chests and say, look at all the stings we're doing and we're catching all these bad guys. You know, we're protecting you this way. What they're not talking about is that, you know, we have things like residency restrictions. We have things like, you know, the Adam Walsh Act, or we have the SORNA, which is the Public Registration and Notification Act.
But not everybody fits into the guidelines that those are written up to depict.
But everybody that's on there is painted with the same brush. You know,
exactly.
as the public tends to not understand that, you know, in some states urinating in public is going to put you on there. In other states it's going to be flashing. It's going to be being caught naked in your own hot tub, for God's sake. It's a Romeo and Juliet that was consensual 15, 20 years ago. You know, it's child pornography viewing as much as it's a Richard Garrido out of California who had Jesse Dugard in his backyard for 18 years. It's the guy that is, you know, Donald Smith, who abducted Cherish Periwinkle here in Florida and murdered this little 8-year-old girl. They're putting them all on there, and when someone reads one of these flyers or they read what's on the public notification and it says sexual exploitation of a child, or it says lewd and lascivious, or it says,
you want to hang them.
But they don't know what they're reading. They don't understand that sexual exploitation of a child could mean viewing a naked image of a 17-year-old girl or a 14-year-old girl or a 12-year-old girl. It doesn't mean you produced it. They don't understand that. They don't understand what a Romeo and Juliet is, which is lewd and lascivious, endangerment of a minor. They don't understand this. But we, as a society, are not educating the public. I know personally, when I have a one-on-one conversation with someone and we talk about who's on the registry, I have never gotten a response other than, seriously? So why are we doing that? Why don't we just save it for the guys that are really dangerous to us? I said, even if there was somebody that's really dangerous to you, what would public notification actually do? Because the guy who's really dangerous to you is the guy that lives 3 doors down, owns a gun, has anger management problems, he beats the heck out of his wife on a regular basis, and he drinks, or he takes drugs.
Or his Uncle Buck that Dad just brought home, and he's your uncle.
And exactly, 93% of offenses that happen against a child happen in the home or by someone they know. 7% are actually stranger danger, and all of the laws are geared and modeled around the 7%. It's ludicrous. 5% of the overall registered population are actually dangerous, and anywhere from 5 to almost 15% will actually reoffend, depending upon the category of offender that we're talking about. So using all of these resources to do these things, to increase the budgets of law enforcement, to promote criminal behavior where criminal behavior is not existing.
Well, then you've got to add another element, too. You have to add that of the prosecuting attorney and how these cases are actually paid for. Let me give you an example. They re-justify their funding every year per conviction. Now, what does that tell you? There we have a huge population that we're forcing to plea. We're outright lying in some cases, like the case that my sister-in-law did on the last show about the boy 1 town over, where they lied to the mother. We're going to go after your mom, and we're taking mom if you don't fess up to this. Even
They're
after
allowed
the
to do that. You see it all the time on Law and Order. They do it all the time. They're allowed to do that because they think it's going to get you to confess.
Well, then the prosecutor, too, there are guidelines. There are principles for prosecuting child pornography in minors.
The prosecutor came in my house with the SWAT team. They came in my house and then lied about it in the courtroom. I stood up when I had an opportunity to speak. I said, Your Honor, both the detective and the prosecutor has lied to this court. They were present in my house when that warrant was served.
The 2 counts wasn't good enough for the prosecutor when he knew that the federal government had declined Andrew's case. We're dealing with a small-town prosecutor here. And because he got angry that we took it public, he tacked on another charge. Here's what the charge is. Because Andrew signed the user agreement for LimeWire, that's proof that he was going to distribute it.
Oh, crap.
Isn't that wonderful? That's proof. Now, how many of us, be honest here, how many of us really read a user agreement at all before we sign it?
Never.
How many of us with a third grade reading level would read, comprehend, or digest that?
No one.
Okay.
Hey, Kitty.
But see, he got mad. It went public.
Hey, Kitty, this is Cole. I was going to cut in and actually queue up a music break, so maybe anybody needs to use the restroom, get a drink, or whatever. Just kind of put a bookmark in it for the moment. And before we go to break, I also wanted to share some thoughts on some stuff you all were talking about earlier in the show when you were talking about the sexualization of youth through media versus the amount of education received in the public education system, and how the people have said, well, it's not up to us to educate. And I 100% agree. I think parents should be more proactive in teaching their kids all aspects of the boogeyman. Take away the boogeyman aspect of it and teach them what's real, and
but
not
who's teaching the parents?
True.
Exactly. The kids know more about the technology than most of the parents that buy the devices.
But one thing I wanted to point out, this idea of over-sexualization of youth, you're giving a kid a loaded gun. They're not given proper education about it, and then they're put through this culture that this is going to get. We could. I don't want to expand on it and take up too much time, but you have to consider, just like you said. I forget exactly who said it, but they're following their models. That's all part of the plan. It's role modeling, and that's exactly what they do. And Miley Cyrus right now is the best example because she's the current one that they've just done it to. They had Hannah Montana, played by Miley Cyrus.
Yep.
They grew up with her. They modeled everything they do after her. So then when she puts out an album and new music videos where she's barely dressed, acting sexual, it's going to affect those girls that idolize her if they're not prepared to reject that kind of role modeling. And that's just what we have. And that's why I was saying it's like giving a kid a loaded gun, because on the flip side of this coin is the media aspect of it. And that's all they do. That's all they do.
They hype everything.
Yeah, just look at Disney. Look at all the subliminals in Disney movies, whether it's visual subliminals where, body parts are drawn into the cartoon characters, or words are hidden within the smoke in clouds, or words
Disney
are being actually
is a
spoken.
producer of adult porn.
Mm-hmm.
Disney?
Yes, ma'am. Look it up. Disney produces. They have an adult porn industry.
We should go after the porn industry and ask them to help, because they say child porn is like a nightmare for them. We should go after them and help, and they should get involved with anti-child pornography billboards and things like that. They've got plenty of money.
Somebody already said it earlier. You don't need, at this day and age, you don't even really need the Internet. You can turn on cable television and watch dance moms. I completely agree. Yep. You've got these girls in little leotards dancing around, stretching and stuff.
Look what Dancing in the
commercials.
Stars.
But look at the commercials. I was watching television around the holidays, and there was a commercial for Hanes, I think it was, and it may have been a JCPenney commercial. And when you're looking at the screen, what you're seeing is this very pretty, very colorful pattern, geometric pattern, and then they move to another one. It's the whole screen. And then the camera backs away, and what you realize that you're looking at was a young lady's crotch, because it was an advertisement for underwear.
Yeah, I do recall that.
What does child porn look like to a child?
Yeah, It's everywhere.
Right. Yep. So on that note, we're going to put a bookmark in the conversation, and we're going to listen to a song. And I don't know, this is probably not everybody's cup of tea, but then we are back live on Stable Radio. This is U.S. Government Uses Child Porn to Entrap Citizens Part 2. The date is February 16th, 2014. The time is approximately 6:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I hope everybody wasn't too shocked by that music. This is Stay-Bold Radio, and that is the type of music we play. And it is shocking, and that is by design. It's meant to be shocking because you kind of have to, be shocking to wake some people out of their apathy. So we're back live with Kitty, Scott, Gail, and Rita, and Esther.
Hi, Esther.
Everybody's back.
I am going to have to leave you all now. I have somebody coming to the house, but I just want to tell you this is extremely interesting. And Gail and Rita, please let me know how, what transpires in the rest of the program. And hopefully we'll get on the next episode that you're having very shortly, I hope.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you very much for all you're doing. It's a worthy cause.
Thank you, Esther.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye, all.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
How long does this program usually go?
We're scheduled for 2 hours, and we have, if the conversation is still going, we have the ability to go a third hour. Generally slated for 2 hours.
I don't know that I can hang in much longer, actually. Rita?
Yes, I understand.
Are you good? Can you go the distance?
Sure. Go right ahead.
All right.
Thanks for the information that you shared. And sometime off the show, I'd like to join forces with the many groups that are out there. And I think by doing so, we can make some headway in this.
I absolutely be more than happy to share my contact. Rita can get all of our contact to you, and we'd love to have you sit in and join a Question Click meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay. Take care, Gail.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, darling. Thank you for what you're doing. Much appreciated.
Okay. All right.
Your story.
I do have a question for Kitty.
Mhm.
Obviously, you've been very educated on this whole topic.
I didn't want to be.
No. I just, it's almost like reliving the whole day over again when you talk to other people who've gone through this. And it's been a nightmare from the beginning, and, unfortunately, the nightmare doesn't end because when they come out, they're labeled as sex offenders. And
that's part of the reason we have to change that. We've got to change the way that and, for it being a federal offense, okay, and for all of our states, it's supposed to be like a uniform code thing. Well, I need to let you know it doesn't work that way in every state. Alaska's take on it is different from North Carolina's take, where the Adam Walsh Act is in effect. Some guys in other states can get out on their own recognizances and on bail before their trial, So it just depends. And one of the things I think people aren't aware of, they need to be aware of, is what the specific laws and what the tendency natures of the prosecutions and judges are in those laws. It varies so much from state to state with the same type of offense. And that's something I don't think most people realize. The case up here in Alaska, the boys, and there were many of them that were hit up in the sting up here, Our Lady Magistrate basically gave these kids probation till high school and record cleared and then laid into the Joint Task Force team like you wouldn't believe. We were appalled. But we are the exception, okay? And that depends on what judge you get.
Exactly. Because I could tell you I spoke to a woman last night from Florida whose son is facing 17 to 20 years because they went
facing 20. And
Pardon
we
me?
don't know with this new charge that he's stuck on saying, well, because he signed the user agreement, that means he was intending to distribute.
Right.
The other thing we need to look at is the prosecutions, not just the laws, but the prosecutors themselves. And one of the things I've taken the liberty to do in my nephew's case is to look into everything related to Robert E. Parks. Okay? What kind of relationships does he have with other attorneys? What are the things that he says to most of the clients that are being prosecuted under these circumstances? What are the outcomes of those cases? Did they take plea deals? Did they go to trial? What type of punishments were recommended? Were there other cases that were more lenient than other cases? If they had this defense attorney versus that defense attorney, is there a relationship there between this guy and the prosecuting attorney? Okay, what it all got down to, and what it gets down to in a lot of these cases, is how they are paid. Sometimes they have been known, the Joint Task Force has been known to pad their numbers to make it appear that we just busted 127 people out in Nevada that were caught up in a child porn ring. Well, let's take a closer look at that, too. Okay? Were these people that accidentally hit a tainted file on some P2P file sharing site? Was it somebody that you sent a link to on Angry Birds that said, download this link to improve your score? Or was it really the people that would trade in child pornography?
Right. Exactly. I have to be honest with you, none of this, I cannot think of one person who has addressed any of this in a trial.
I couldn't either. That's why we went public. I could not stand the thought of this innocent child who this kid wouldn't hurt a fly. Okay, this is a sweet, innocent kid. I could not stand the thought of what was happening to him, so I asked the why question. My dad used to tell me I came out of the womb asking why, but I always asked why, and I always expect an answer back. And when I don't get the answers back, I dig until I get them. And the more I dig, the sicker I get at the way that they're actually executing the type of sting, when we have a much better way of going after those that actually produce the child porn, but we're choosing not to use it. Instead, we had the Joint Task Force because it's a global problem. Child pornography is a global problem. Mm-hmm. But we do produce it here in the United States as well. And one of the ways that the people trade in it is they make the films and they stick them out there, either encrypted or hidden in different P2P file sharing sites. So the whole stings went on the premise that, okay, if we look up the word honeypot, anybody that hits honeypot's got to be a child pornographer. Well, that's not true. Honeypot is also a Walt Disney song about Winnie the Pooh. Okay, so where was the oversight here, people? Where was anybody's hand way back when that went up and went, okay, what are you doing to protect people that might not know you're doing a sting? Are you going to send out flyers that say, attention parents, this is the FBI and ICE, and we're going to be conducting an internet child porn sting, so please don't let your children go to any P2P file sharing sites. Most people don't even know what P2P means, as most of the parents. Yes, I don't know how many times I answer the phone and the parents go, what is a P2P file sharing site? I said, well, it's the place they go to get songs from their friends. I didn't know those were bad. In fact, when the regs did the Sullivan High School and Sue, my sister-in-law, asked them, what about P2P file sharing sites in LimeWire? She was told that LimeWire was an illegal site. Technically, it's not an illegal site. Illegal activity can happen on that site. Right. But nobody told anybody, attention parents, don't let your kids go to these sites. And then we get back to money, too, because what is the crust of these sites? What is the big reason they would put it on these sites? Let's look at that, okay? It's a thing called copyright. Copyright, yep. You trade record albums, copyrighted material. The artist does not get paid for the song if you're stealing the Madonna album from your girlfriend who put it on a P2P file sharing site, okay? So copyright infringement laws also played a very big factor in the way they decided to do the stings, okay? So your money, no matter where you turn in this stings and in the multiple stings, there's money. If you're really going to set up a real sting and you really want to go after the pervs that are out there molesting kids, taking pictures of them and putting them online, honey, they've got far better tools they can use besides targeting autistic children and those with developmental disabilities, to include 82% of the ones that are caught up in the sting. And the average person caught up in these stings is under the age of 25, and they go as the youngest case I had was 11.
Yes. I'm horrified every time we visit my son in prison and see the young men that were there. And my gut tells me what they're there for.
can you tell them, because you've been there, okay, and I don't want to make you do anything you're uncomfortable with, but because you've been there, what is that like? Give me a step-by-step procedure. Most people only know prison if they've never been there from what they watch on TV, and I know it's not like that. So as a mom that goes, tell me what you go through to go there. Besides the front door, what happens next?
You have to have you have to be pre-approved. You have to be put on a list. You have to be critiqued first before you can visit. They do, a check on you to make sure you don't have any criminal history, that you have known this person before, and once you're approved, you could go in to visit. You have to bring fill out a form with the color of your car, the license plate number, who you're visiting, the fact that you don't have arms and assert all of that kind of arms, drugs. You cannot go in with your a phone, any kind of metal, and then you have to go through the metal detector before you're taken up as a group to go visit. That's how it is in the prison where I visit my son.
Are you allowed to sit at a table with him? Is it one of those glass things? What's that part like?
The first place he was sent before he was assigned a federal prison was behind glass, yes. And it took 3 months to get him to a federal prison. So that was a nightmare in itself. And then he was sent to a prison in Pennsylvania. I live in New York.
So you don't have to stay.
Hey, Kitty and Rita, we have a caller with their hand up if you'd like to bring them into the studio.
Okay, sure.
We have caller in the 828 area code live on Stable Radio.
Yes, my name is Margie Valentine from North Carolina. I'm on the executive board of Caution Click and know Rita and Gail very well. I wanted to let you know I was here online the whole time, and I can't stand much longer, but our son fit the typical category. He was 21 years old. Actually, I say 21 going on 18. He was very immature. We are certain that he falls on the lower end of the autistic scale, just from
spectrum,
spectrum, just from his personality and growing up and so on. Definitely a follower, kind of a quiet loner type person, spent a lot of time on the computer. We absolutely were ignorant. Again, we're probably typical of most groups, of the fact you could obtain child pornography free online and how easy it was to get to. And my son started with adult pornography, and he used LimeWire for music, and we know that's how he came about child pornography. He was sentenced the minimum sentence by a judge in Rochester, New York, where we lived at the time, to the minimum 5 years, but 30 years probation. And this is what we're dealing with now. He was just released in April, and we had since moved to North Carolina because he was sent to prison in Florida. And we just had to be closer to him to be able to visit more often. And you're right, Kitty, state to state, the state laws, as far as when you're on probation and when you are on the registry, and here in North Carolina is 30 years, which may as well be life.
It may as well. And that sex tag is for life.
Yes. Basically, he can't use the public library, can't go to church, go to parks, playgrounds. There's a big sign posted in front of the rec center that sex offenders not allowed beyond there. And again, we know that he is a gentle person. He would not ever physically hurt anyone. And again, we were ignorant and not talking with him, and we have that guilt. But we as far as the way
Honey,
we
that
raised,
was our generation. We grew up as we don't really talk
about that.
And
as far as the way we raised him as a family and his nature, we never considered it would ever be an issue.
Right.
In
Most
terms
parents
of,
don't.
Something we just never thought about.
Most of the cases of the other autistic kids are Down's kids. That's the first thing the parents said. They don't even know what sex is. You know, we never taught him about that because we didn't think we needed to. You know, that is the number one response. It is not something that you should bang your head over and have that guilt, okay? Because had anybody come to you and said, ma'am, you know, I know that little Johnny's a little slow, but we might want to teach about this. Had anyone approached you on it, would you have thought about it and then done it? Mm-hmm. I'm asking this question for a reason, because we're looking at a huge percentage of what I'm going to call slow or developmentally delayed, or people that fit on the spectrum disorder that are sitting in prison that never even had what we call the sex talk because nobody approached the parents and taught them more about the conditions of their children. Had somebody come to you and said, you know, could you do this, would you have done that?
Absolutely.
If they told you the dangers, if you didn't, would you have done it? Yeah, you would have.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
This is Rita again. If you had, maybe this is just pure ignorance on my part, if you had told me 8 years ago that there's anything you could download on the computer that's illegal, I would have thought you were nuts.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Part of that public funding, that designated public funding, is to do just that. When you look at the numbers of the type of individuals that are being put in prison for this type of offense, and you have such an astronomical high number of the developmentally delayed in one form or another, you know, we all say it's not the government's, you know, responsibility. Excuse me. Sex education at the most vulnerable segment of our population certainly is the government's responsibility, especially if you're going to throw them in prison if nobody knows.
Yeah,
now, we have IEPs and we have school meetings, but we've got some schools that don't want to teach sex education. Okay, this is the case in Sullivan, Missouri. We've got other schools that have adopted the Common Core, which teach, in my opinion, a little bit too much sex education. Okay? We're getting into bisexuality, homosexuality, masturbation, and all kinds of things. Little kids are coming home with all kinds of things. There's got to be a happy medium. But what my big complaint is I would like to see some of that designated funding, and not just in a where you throw out a flyer and one or two people show up in an auditorium. Every special ed parent get a packet the minute that their kid hits the school on an IEP or your little Johnny's diagnosed as slow about sexuality. And here's why. Amongst the developmentally delayed and the autistic children, there's a thing called heightened sensitivity. Some of these children don't learn reading as well as others, but they're visually stimulated. When you hit puberty, you have a rush of hormones that is just like sticking a needle in your arm of drugs, okay? And if everything you see on TV, and nobody's told you about sex, is Miley Cyrus and the Kardashians, and that picture does come across your screen, here's little Johnny sitting alone in the basement, and there's a picture of boobs. He's going to get stimulated, okay? So if we don't talk to him about what that is and those crushing, raging hormones through your body, you know, I beg to ask the question, you know, are we really arming them with the information they know to exist in the outside world, which is full of it? We're not. And if we're going to get into the morality of it, you know, there's a huge population of the molested children and the children that appear on those pictures that have disabilities. It's our most vulnerable segment of our population. But there wasn't any of that. There wasn't anybody banging on our doors and saying, you know, listen, Kitty, if you don't teach Chase about this, you know, these hormones are going to hit, and he's a visually stimulated kid, and he's going to, you know, these are going to happen. I didn't know. I've raised an autistic child. You know, this isn't my nephew. I have a son named Chase that's autistic.
Well,
but I was a different kind of parent, you know. I didn't think I had to.
Yeah. We also need this education, to push this education to the courts, because so many judges have in their head that there's this distinct correlation between viewing it and actually acting on it, and that's precisely what the judge said when he sentenced my son to 30 years probation. Was
exactly.
That, they were stimulated, and that they would act on their stimulation and do this, and he said, this is my belief, and that's what he based 30 years probation on. And anybody that looks at the sex offender registry or finds that my son's on 30 years probation is going to think that he, is the worst sexual predator and monster on earth.
And he's not.
They don't know.
And plus we have to stress to the children, not just the sex part, but when a child's alone with his device or his computer, he really believes he's alone, okay? Yeah. And we all have private thoughts. A boy going through puberty, wakes up sometimes in a pump tent and, there's things that happen there. He believes he's alone. It's okay. He gets embarrassed if mom discovers the bed sheets, but, we have this misgiving belief that we are alone. We no longer live in that world. Okay, never. Not with all the electronic devices and surveillance and everything we had. You're never really alone. Right now it's all of us, and it's the radio show listeners, and hello, Mr. NSA. Okay? We're never alone anymore. So one of the things that I really want to see changed out of this, I don't ever want to see another Andrew or another your child or another Rita's child. I don't want to see that. I want to see educating them. I know some parents that are deeply religious. We don't believe in that type of sexual education in our home. Well, you know what? When you're gone and she's talking to her friend on that device, are you sure it's really her 16-year-old girlfriend, or is it an FBI agent asking for that selfie?
Exactly.
If you don't talk about it, the kids around them are going to talk about it. If you have one of the slow type of kids, they're loners anyway. They're sexually stimulated, and they need to know what to do about that. They need to know what that's all about. These things would not be as successful if there was that proper spending of that education money for the public. We have the technology for them not to even do the stings. They can catch it right before it even hits the internet now. Okay, so what are they really doing here? Are we fueling the private prison industry, which is now starting to sue states that don't keep them full? What is it really about? After we complained to the reg, they actually 2 months later, did an auditorium, sent out a flyer, and gave a talk. But nowhere in that talk was any of this. They talked about don't put naked pictures out there of yourself. But they didn't talk about this subject. They didn't talk about the stings. They didn't talk about P2P file sharing sites. We're talking designated funding.
Yes, and I think Caution Click, Rita, and all these incredibly knowledgeable parents, mothers, this big push is that we need to educate the parents and the public about how very easily this can happen.
Yes, and that is a very that's a primary goal for Caution Click. I mean, education definitely is something that we want to see happen not only in the school systems, but as Margie said, people just do not realize how close they are to having this happen to them. And with that, we want to see reform.
I get phone calls and PMs all the time since Andrew's video was out there. Jackie Cook, another friend of ours that you all may know. It's a sad thing. I call it fresh cases is when I get a phone call. Are you that autistic kid's aunt? Yeah. Well, this just happened to me, and I'm here in New York, and I don't know what to do. They just came, they took my computer, and they questioned my kid, and I don't know what to do. Most people don't know. The first part of the phone call, you're spent crying with them. The second part of the phone call, you're telling them to breathe. By the third part, you can kind of pick for answers. I know of 16. I've been able to locate 16 different types of stings. There's over 61 active. And there's no telling the public about it. We read about it in the paper when they make a major bust.
Football coach and several other people within, the Radford area were just picked up on possession of child pornography.
Okay, but they never give the details. If that case was ever cleared, it's hidden so far back in the paper if it ever hit the paper at all. And everybody just screams, good, burn them.
Exactly.
Great, burn them.
And there isn't a politician who will speak up, who will speak to this subject because they're so afraid of the ramifications.
Yeah, they are. A lot of school teachers are that way. A lot of people would just rather not even deal with that. But they're the same teachers that's going to tell Johnny, put that phone away, quit texting in class. Okay, well, let's look at where the real predators are coming in. Is it the child molester that's going to get our kid? Possibly. But the chance is greater, and over 75% greater, that predator is going to come online. And there's a good chance that if your child goes to any of the sites that any of the other children go to trade video games, it's pictures, it's files, it's albums, it's not just sting stuff or bad stuff. These sites were legitimate sites, for legitimate file sharing. They just happen to be used by people that would trade in child porn. So you put a sting out there that nets any fish. It's like casting a big, huge net across the ocean saying, we're going whale fishing. But when you pull in that net, you got very few whales. What you got was a bunch of guppies. But we need those to justify that spending, and we need the convictions of everybody that's on that to justify the spending. Then we can get more for the sex tag thing, and we can get more law enforcement because the numbers are so great. You got to follow it far beyond the police that knocked on your kid's door. You follow it right back to the very first initial online predator sting, which was Flickr, 2003.
Kitty, have you been politically involved in this at all? Have you taken any kind of action, meeting with your legislators, anything like that?
I've written lots of letters to different congressmen and legislators. I've been trying to, up here, like I said, in Alaska, our laws are a little different. In fact, we had on the floor of our Senate committee here, we have a bill that we're trying to get passed to do more sexual education in schools of this type of thing. Our stance on it, Alaska was the exception to the rule on how most of these were handled. We had 7 known cases that I've been able to document so far of young boys under the age of 18 that were caught up in the sting. And Scott, what year was that? He's not on. Anyway, I believe it was 5 years ago. And I followed those cases. I knew one of the children. Okay, so I followed the cases. And this was a very good little Mormon boy, went to seminary and all that. He had downloaded a couple hundred pictures, okay? And there was even cases of him sharing. Hey, Joe, check this out. Look what I found, Okay. Mm-hmm. Our judge did, because it went to a federal level, our female magistrate said, okay, boys, here's what I'm going to do. Every dang one of you is on probation until you graduate from high school. When you graduate, I'm making this go away. And then she spent a great deal of time laying into the task force. And it was, a big deal. How dare you do this in the state of Alaska? There was no warning for our parents. There was no warning for the kids. These are puberty-stricken teenagers. What the heck were you doing, I wish other prosecutors would do that. I wish other people would look at it.
I'm sorry, I didn't get all that.
Okay, the word after this did get around the judicial system in the state of Alaska. They've tried it again, and basically have been thrown out of court. Unfortunately, like Kitty said, our state is the exception to the rule. The state of Alaska has just found this absolutely heinous by the government.
Yeah.
Well, that is an exception.
But unfortunately, that's not the rest of us. And in many cases, like my case, and Margie cases, the men were like more in their mid-20s and, were charged with it. So we're trying to fight this on a broader level.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The unfair
entrapment, no matter who the victim.
Hey, ladies.
Unfair sentencing.
We have another caller online that wants to say hi. We'll bring him in real quick. This is caller in the area code 919. You're live on Stay Bold Radio.
Hi, my name is David. I was sentenced to 8 years for possession of child pornography. And
how did
I have
it
to
start?
How did it start?
Yeah, how did it start with you, honey?
Well, I was just looking for adult pornography, and I just kept stumbling into it until I started collecting it. At first, it was shocking, and I erased it and moved on, but eventually I realized that it was turning me on, and I guess I started exploring it as another kind of pornography.
Okay, how did you get busted, and how long had that been going on?
It went on for a long time. It was probably about 7 years, I guess. And I was busted when a cop, so the way I did it was I set up a file sharing program that anybody could go to, and they could just take whatever I had and leave whatever they wanted to. And so a cop just came and downloaded something from me, and that was it.
Mm.
So, yeah, go ahead.
What happened after that?
So, well, they came and they took my computer, and I'm trying to remember the timeline. I guess about a year later, I had my court date, and I went in, and they actually, I pled innocent so that I could spend Christmas with my family, and then I came back and pled guilty and went to prison. Or actually, I went to jail. So I spent a year in jail, and then I went to prison, served a total of 7 years.
And do you have a sex tag now?
Yeah, I'm registered, if that's what you mean.
And how does that affect?
What state?
North Carolina.
You're in North Carolina?
Yeah.
So am I.
So, so after 10 years, I can appeal to the courts to try and take it off.
Let me ask you something else, David. Had you known, had anybody told you that this would happen, that this is out there, and told you the difference between adult porn and child porn and what porn was in general, had you known that earlier or during that time period, would that have made a difference?
So I knew what I was doing was illegal. I knew it was wrong, although mainly I just knew what a loser it made me. And so that was, what made it hard for me. The thing is, if I had known the consequences, and also if I had known more about what it's like to be a victim of child pornography, I would not have done it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very naive, and I thought, well, I'm not, physically hurting anybody. I'm just looking at pictures, and that's just the way I looked at it.
Well,
so,
my question for you, David, also just for I want to say thank you for calling in and giving us your personal story.
I agree. You're very courageous.
That's tremendous that you have the fortitude to call in and do that. Thank you for sharing with us. Just also, question mark in my mind. I'm 31. I know I probably sound younger than that. You sound like a young guy, and you said you spent how many years inside?
Roughly 7, yeah.
Roughly 7, and you said you were actively looking at that stuff for about 7 years prior.
Right.
Okay, so about what age did you start downloading that material?
In high school.
So you aren't even an adult yet at that point?
That's correct.
Legally, okay. And then when you actually went to jail after conviction, how old were you? If you don't mind.
Let's see, it was about 10 years ago. I guess that would have made me about 27, 28, something like that.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I'm older than I sound.
Not always a bad thing.
Young boy.
So
has it changed the way you look at relationships and stuff now? How does this experience mentally affect you today?
Jeez. I don't know if we have enough time. So, I mean, look, I've never been good with women. I've always been shy. I've always been afraid of rejection. I've always sort of been kind of scared of commitment in relationships. And it certainly hasn't helped that. You know, I have all the same problems that I had before, except that now I'm also a sex offender and everything that goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you're in a situation where, you know, your PO is telling you that if you date somebody who has a child, you have to tell her about your conviction immediately, that makes it hard to have relationships.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
So, you know, I really want that sort of healthy relationship, but I just don't know how to get it.
Mm-hmm. David, do you have to attend group therapy sessions and so on?
I did for the first year and a half or so I got out of prison, but I graduated from the course, and I don't have. Thank you.
My son's doing that right now.
Did you find that helpful?
Yes and no. I think it was useful to have a support group and to meet other people who are going through the same kinds of things and to sort of learn some of the a little more perspective and, you know, all these kinds of things. But I don't know. This may be a little bit naive, but I feel like I really just need somebody to set me up on some blind dates, and they can do that for me. So, to answer the previous question about how it's affecting me, it's you know, pretty much, I won't say it's destroying my life. That's a little melodramatic, but it is, you know, pushing me, you know, to the bottom rung of society in every way. I have a computer science degree from a major university.
You probably can't use it, right?
Well, for the first 2 years I couldn't, but because I've done so well, they let me get one. I just have to pay to have it monitored by a third party.
Yes.
What do you pay for that?
It's not too bad. It's $35 a month. So, but the problem is that it's $35 for each device. So if you want an iPhone, you're paying another $35. If you want a video game system, you're paying another $35. You know, if you want a laptop or, you know, whatever, a notepad, it's another $35.
And then you have to pay for therapy as well, correct?
I didn't, actually, because I'm federal. If I'd been state, I would have had to pay. And so the problem that I'm running into is that nobody will hire me, like for any kind of white-collar job at all, no matter what. I went to a job interview recently where the guy who was interviewing me said, you know what, you know, I was convicted of a drug offense. I believe in second chances. I think you've changed. I think you'll be great for this job. I mean, you're so well qualified. I'm going to go to it was a job agency, so we'll go to the person who would be an employer, and I will go to bat for you, and I will do everything I can to get them to hire you. And he couldn't do it. Like, I've gone to interviews, and I've had the people who are interviewing me try to console me, right? They'd say, look, you know, you're doing everything right, you know, just keep it up, you know, I respect what you're doing, I think that you can make it, but we just can't hire you. And I've heard that again and again and again. I've gone to somebody, and she said, you know, I'm a superstar at this company. You know, I think you have what it takes. I want to hire you. You're at the top of my list. I just have to, you know, let corporate know. But, you know, they usually let me do what I want because I'm doing a really good job for them. And then a few days later, I got a little, you know, note card from her saying, you know, sorry, I can't hire you.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. You're a registered sex offender and you're on the list. if a group of very pissed off mamas formed a pack and got together with other mamas, and we came up with a universal card called a non-child sex offending card, okay, that proved that you weren't one of these pervs, and we got people around the world to understand what this type of card meant, okay, that you've been interviewed and we know your case, da-da-da-da, and you have this kind of card that proved to employers or whatever that you weren't one of these kids, you know, molesting a 4-year-old in your basement, would that make a difference?
It would make absolutely no difference at all. And I'll tell you
where
why.
I'm going, ladies?
Because
you want me to tell you why I think?
Do it.
The reason why it wouldn't... Go
ahead, David.
So the reason why it would make a difference is because 2 reasons. First of all, in the vast majority of businesses, when you go in for an interview, the person that you're talking to isn't the person who has the final say. There's always corporate, there's always the owner, there's always somebody else. The person you're talking to is HR. And so the person who can actually make the decision to hire you never actually gets to meet you. And so this is all they know about you. And the second problem is that the vast majority of companies are incredibly risk-averse. I mean, there's no profit in them to ever, you know, give you a second chance, because why should they? They've got 100 guys knocking down their door without that kind of handicap. And so, you know, there's no reason for them to ever do it. And so, you know, it's kind of like if you want to make a decent life for yourself, you almost have to start your own business.
Right.
Just so that you...
Yeah.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in real quick? This is Cole, David. I actually watched, just in the background, the other night I watched a show about guys doing time in prison, and, you know, one of them was locked up for statutory rape because he was 17, his girlfriend was 15, but when he turned 18, the day he turned 18, the girl's mother went and, you know, filed charges, and he ended up doing a few years on statutory rape, and he was saying the exact same thing. The show followed him after he was paroled, and he could not find work because the same things you're talking about, and he relied on salvaging scrap metal. Like a scavenger, he would have to go and load up a pickup truck with scrap metal and sell it at a recycling yard, and that was his livelihood because nobody would hire him. And then on a personal level, something I'd like to share with you and the ladies on the panel tonight and all the listeners. My brother is actually a registered sex offender, and he was at a house party with adults. There was drinking involved, and he made comments towards his friend's girlfriend, you know, thinking that maybe she was the kind of girl that would, you know, entertain more than one guy, and made comments that he was interested in having sex with her, and it got blown out of proportion, and he ended up taking a plea bargain for sexual assault, even though he never touched the woman.
Well,
he did.
That's
40
one thing
years.
about. Sorry, that's one thing about assault that a lot of people don't understand is that you don't actually have to do anything to be charged with the different kinds of assault. You only have to, you know, threaten to.
Right.
That's why it's called assault and battery.
Well, that's what they got him for. So he was in for 4 years and was released about a year ago, last March, and he's run into the same issues as well. And he's not even labeled as any kind of child, nothing about children to it. This was strictly between adults, but because he has that sex offender registry for life in the state of Missouri, he's having employment issues as well. So,
right.
You know,
that's another thing that people. I think that's another thing that people don't understand about the registry is that it's become so broad that it's almost meaningless. You know, people in various states have been forced to register for, you know, peeing on a tree in a public place. Somebody was forced to register for wrongful imprisonment because he kept a child locked in a car for a few hours. And when he was sentenced, the judge's rationale for that was, well, what you did was harmful to a child, therefore the public needs to be protected from you. And I think you can see what a slippery slope that is.
Very.
And there's just so many different kinds of, people who date rape are sex offenders too. And so, so all these people, a serial child rapist, all lumped together. Like, you see somebody as a registered sex offender, you actually have no idea what it is they actually did.
Yeah.
Well, here's one. I'm gonna make a couple points and then take a break, and I hope that everyone will come back after the music break. And but I wanted to make a point real quick. My brother is my roommate. He moved in with me last July and continues to live here. So because he lives here and he's on the registry, my home address is on the registry. Mm-hmm. What happened after he moved in, this is the mentality, again, where I'm just kind of telling this story to illustrate how people will lump everybody in the same category. And just like Kitty said, they want to hang them high. About a month after my brother moved in one day, my neighbor knocks on the door. He has a plain envelope with just his address written on the front. And he shows me what was inside the envelope. There was no stamp. It had not gone through the U.S. postage, but it was hand-delivered to his address and probably every house on this block. It was a plain envelope with just an address. Inside was Xerox copies of all of my brother's files. I say all, I'm sure not 100, every single file, but the basics. All
like
of his
downloaded off SafeNet type?
Yeah, off of MoDoc, Missouri Department of Corrections.com, and you can go in and look up anybody and print off their picture and their information. It's there for the public, and he is registered. He's on there. He's not hiding. This is not a state where you don't have to put a sign in your front yard, so we don't put a sign, but, he is registered. It's not hidden. Well, some citizen took it upon themselves to make these packets and hand-deliver them to every neighbor on my block. And the following day, I received one in my mailbox 24 hours later, as if to say, yeah, we were here putting these in the mailbox yesterday, and then we came back to put one in yours today. And it was the same packet, the same material. But that kind of goes into gang stalking, and this touches back on what everyone's talking about, where, for one, if you're a registered offender, they're just going to lump you into this ultimate bad guy category.
Yes.
And for two, they kind of are quick to assume guilt. If in Kitty's case with her nephew, everybody's quick to jump to assume guilt and want to hang them high. And, so at that point, honestly, it's been about 6 months now and everything seems to be okay. But for a little while there, I was worried about gang stalking situation. Somebody, with some kind of vendetta.
Well, there's been guys that have
been
beat up and stuff, nonviolent sex offenders that have been beat up, stalked, literally.
Well, I was going to mention, I want to take a short music break. Before I do that, I want to announce to the listening audience that my show is The Aberration on Stay Bold Radio. It airs Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's where this program tonight started, was on an episode of The Aberration. I took a break last Friday night because it was Valentine's Day, and I figured everybody was out doing their own thing. And I'll be back this Friday night with Chris Saldana. I hope I'm saying your name right. If not, you can correct me when we're live on air. Next Friday night, that'll be February 21st, and we're going to be talking about the Florida Craigslist entrapment stings, where Chris was a victim of this Craigslist entrapment. And this happens, not just in Florida, but in particular in that state. Him and another man named Trey are going to be talking next Friday night on The Aberration about the Florida Craigslist sting entrapment and what's going on there. So I'm looking forward to that as well. It's kind of a continuation of this topic. And technical issues here at Stable Radio. We are back live with U.S. government uses child porn to entrap citizens, and the time is 7:58 Eastern Standard Time in America. That barbecue sauce commercial is just kind of an inside joke. I'm hoping if I play it long enough, Casey Masterpiece will start sending me a check in the mail. But it hasn't happened yet. What's that?
So you want to pull Stephen Colbert? Yeah, that happened on his show. People started sending him stuff.
Right. Yeah, they could send me some barbecue sauce. I wouldn't complain about that either. So we're back, and we're joined with Rita from Kitty Wolf, and Rita from Caution Click, and David, who was telling us about his personal story of being labeled as a sex offender for life. And, I guess one thing we kind of didn't touch on is, you admitted that you kind of stumbled across these pictures, and at first you weren't interested, but then you kind of were, and then you became more and more interested. And one of the points that Kitty makes is that a lot of these images that are continuing to be put up on the Internet, it's the FBI putting it up there.
Yeah.
They're creating this environment, where you weren't actively seeking this stuff, but they put it there, and then you see it, and now you're interested.
Well, that goes to stimulation. Here you're a young puberty, you're hitting puberty, you're in high school, and you're a boy. Okay? If we were to go back in time to 1950, your first stimulation was the high school cheerleader team, but there was a different world then. Nowadays, you're flooded with it on every aspect. So when you hit those pictures and you think that you're alone and you're looking at them, that's kind of what you perceive to be like a private moment, you and your sexuality and yourself there, and guys do that. That's a guy thing, I think that by introducing you, they say that people that are addicted to porn, it starts off adult porn and gets into the child porn, and you want more, you want greater, it's kind of like a drug addiction in a way. So if you're out there and you're a teenager and your first click on a Winnie the Pooh song and you're going to pull up a picture of porn and you're, a teenager, you're going to look.
Well,
okay?
And they also create that slippery slope where they're
yep.
molding the taste buds of the viewer, where look at the market of legal 18 plus models legal porn that is themed around barely legal 18 plus girl next door. These are Hustler has the barely legal line, Playboy has
yep.
girls next door, college girls, co-eds. And look at the big market for babysitter porn. Okay, seriously, babysitter porn. Just think about that for a second. I'm not a Howard Stern listener, but I have a cousin who is, and I was riding in a car on a road trip with him. He was listening to Howard Stern, and Howard Stern was going on about how he loves babysitter porn. It's his favorite porn. Well, let's look at the fantasy there. Who's typically the babysitter? Usually a
yeah.
teenager. So they're creating this. They're molding the taste buds of the porn viewers, in my opinion.
Actually, just let me comment on it. We are now working. This is Rita again, and Margie could verify this. We are working with documentary filmmakers who are exploring what is happening, exactly what you have just said, that we are literally cultivating this societal problem. And I'd be happy to introduce anyone to the filmmakers. We've met them at several conferences. They've been to my home and done filming, just to expose this problem, to educate the public on it.
Excellent. Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but I would like to hear more about that movie they're working on, the documentary. We have about 7 minutes left of the live show. We can talk for another hour after the live show if we want to. We have a whole another hour to talk. But what happens is everybody who's listening on the Internet right now, if that includes you listening to my voice and you're on the Internet and you want to continue listening to the show beyond when the live feed ends in 6.5 minutes, you'd have to call this phone number, 347-205-9576. It's listed on the Blog Talk Radio show page. If you call that number, you can join the conversation or just listen for the overtime. Now, the overtime hour is included on the archive replay, so anybody who listens to the show later, you will be able to hear the full everything that happens after the live feed ends. So you have a choice. You can call in and listen live, or if you want to catch the end of the show, catch the replay later and listen to the ending. But that's just a little message we put out. If you want to continue listening after this point, it's like 5 minutes now because I keep talking about it. 347-205-9576. That's the stable listener line. And we have another person in the studio, area code 915, that has their hand up to speak, and I'm going to go ahead and bring them in before the live feed ends. Listener 915, you're live on Stable Radio. Did you have anything to add, or? I guess not. Okay. Sorry. So now everybody knows that the live feed ends in about 5 minutes, and we'll probably be talking a little bit after that if you want to call in and listen. And before we do in the live feed, I want to thank all the listeners, everybody who's been listening about this topic. It's a heavy, heavy topic, but there's a lot of victims out there. These wonderful women you've heard speaking tonight, talking about their family being victims, and David getting caught up in it, and then there's going to be a continuation next Friday night with the guys from Florida who are caught up in similar circumstances. And it looks like that caller has called back in. I'm going to see if, one more time, caller 915, you're live on Stable Radio. Did you want to join the conversation?
Thank you, Cole. I accidentally pushed end instead of mute.
Who are we speaking with?
Yeah. I've gotten a hold of Kitty this past week, and we have talked about a lot of things. One of the things that I noticed when my son got wrapped up in this, he was 19 years old, and he had found these images online through a site that gamers would go to interact with each other. Now, some of the things that he was telling me really was disheartening. He was telling me that the kids today are sharing this stuff, that they are finding it and they are sharing it and they're passing it around like it's candy. Now, they really have no idea what they're getting into, and as Kitty was saying, the education level on these types of situations is null to void.
It's not out there.
Not out there. I mean, I talked to my son about everything. I talked to him. We had very open relationship about sex and everything else. But it never occurred to me that child pornography was so accessible. I mean, the gentleman caller that's on here, what's your name?
David.
David, I really appreciate you coming out. This was, don't know how much courage it took for you to do, but we do appreciate it. I think it was courageous of you. The thing that I'm seeing is that gentlemen such as David, and he was very young as well, and even the older gentleman, is that it is just way too accessible. It is too easy. It is infiltrating adult sites. It is infiltrating these sites that the kids are going to. And, you think that it's not, you think that somebody would have to go search for it. They should not be this accessible.
Oh, no.
But that's not the case. That's not the case. And when my son was telling me about all the other kids that were getting into this, it just, my heart sunk. He said, Mom, they would fill up a prison if they arrested every one of them. And you know what? I think they are.
They are. It's hit every single state.
They're going to fill up the prison with the youth of America, with these young boys, and they are going to ruin their lives forever without a single thought as to the implications that it's doing to us as a nation and a society.
Can I speak to that for a minute?
Please.
Yeah.
So I was reading an article about a case where a 17-year-old guy convinced a 16-year-old boy and his 14-year-old girlfriend, who were in a sexual relationship, to produce and sell videos of themselves having sex to try and make money. And the 17-year-old, they were caught. The 17-year-old guy was tried as an adult. I don't remember how much time he got, but it was pretty serious. 16-year-old guy was tried. He got prison time. And they were going to charge the 14-year-old girl, too, because she was a willing participant. And the thing that's so shocking about all this is that you're creating all these laws ostentatiously for the purpose of protecting children, and I want to know, how does sending children to prison protect them? You know, children get raped in prison. They get beaten up and abused. Prison is not a good place for children.
Not only that, but there has to be, at some point, I mean, these people that go around and do this. I asked an FBI agent that was involved in one of the stings, you know, do you care how the kid got it? Well, no, that's not my job. Do you care about treatment for this or what happens afterwards? My job is just to get them and lock them up.
Right. And another thing is that...
I think we have a big... One hand doesn't see what the other hand's doing.
Right.
You know?
And
he's told to go out and get.
Any, you know, high school student with a camera can produce child pornography. And so one of the things that you're seeing a lot more of nowadays, from what I've read at least, is that, you know, you have a lot of teenagers with all their hormones and so on, you know, sexting each other. They'll take pictures of themselves and send it to their boyfriends or girlfriends because they're in a relationship already. I mean, they're already in a sexual relationship, and this is just a part of that. And so, you know, when you start busting people like that, who are you protecting?
And they bust a lot of those. I don't think America realizes how many kids will, you know, pull their top up and send it to their boyfriend. Their whole world, their whole social life is spent on these devices. You know, nobody looks up at a crosswalk. They're all texting. Plus, you're stimulated by what society dictates. If every time you turn on the TV, you've got a Miley Cyrus or a Kardashian or somebody else doing a sex tape, you know, and they don't know that it's illegal because your stars are emulating it. You know, I can see where two teens might say, oh, we can make a sex video and make some money. Look how much Paris Hilton got off hers. So then you get into the whole morality of society. You know, whose job is it to educate? Whose job is it to teach? You know, and how do you prosecute that which you do not teach?
Right, and what are your goals? Like, what is it you're trying to accomplish with these laws?
To fill up the private prison industry and generate the cash dollars generated by those prisoners.
Right.
True? Yeah, that's what I think it is.
You know, I've known people who've been in the private prisons, and, you know, the thing you got to understand about those is that they're not subject to the same laws and guidelines that government prisons are. The standards are laxer. And so, like, for example, I remember talking to one guy who said that at the prison he was at, they had, like, one basketball for the entire compound to use. That was their recreation. And the same thing is also true, by the way, with jails. Like, some jails are you know, privately owned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew of one jail. It was failing, so I don't know if it still exists, but it was owned by 3 judges. I mean, do you see a conflict of interest there?
Well, that's what I looked into a lot, too, was who owns the private prison complex and how do they differ from state to state, and bottom line, who were shareholders in that. Okay, I took a good hard look at that. They're members of Congress that own stock in private prisons.
It's really eye-opening. So if you don't mind, I have like a list of things that I wrote down as you guys were talking this week and last week that I wanted to address. Do you mind if I tackle that?
Go for it.
Okay, so last week you talked about how a lot of times hands-on offenders tend to get a lot less time than people who download child pornography.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, what I've learned is that a lot of the reason for that is simply the difference between federal and state crimes. That is that states tend to give out much lighter sentences than the federal government does. And since all Internet crimes cross state lines, they're all considered to be federal cases. And so to a large degree, it's really just a matter of who picks up your case. Like I know in my case, I had a lawyer tell me that I would have gotten probation if my case had been picked up by the state instead of the federal government.
Not necessarily true. In Andrew's case, it is in the lower court in Franklin County, and it's not a Fed court that's doing it, and he's still looking at 20 years plus whatever else.
Well, I should say that my knowledge on the subject is, over 10 years old, so it could have changed a lot, and I'm sure it varies from state to state.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that, generally speaking, federal crimes tend to carry much higher sentences than state crimes for the exact same behavior. And the thing that really, I always assumed before I got caught up in all this that federal crimes were somehow more serious than state crimes because it was the federal government who was prosecuting you, and it just, seems like more of a big deal.
Yeah,
but
you would think, huh?
Yeah, but it's completely arbitrary. It's just whichever governmental agency decides they want to take the case, that's who prosecutes you, and those are the laws and the guidelines that you're prosecuted under. And it can vary dramatically.
And it depends on the prosecutor.
Depends on the prosecutor.
Yeah.
That's true for all.
Sometimes it depends on the judge. Our judge up here saw it different than other judges in other states.
Right.
There's a good example. It's the same offense.
There's a good example of that. The guidelines for sex offenders, I think it's for all sex offenders, is the recommended period of supervised release is life for all cases, regardless of the crime they're convicted of, the nature of the case, anything. The recommended term is life. Anytime they go under life, it's because the judge decided to.
And you're saying that's for all crimes, drug crimes?
All sex offenses, period.
All sex
any
offenders.
Kind.
That's my son was, there was a recommendation for life supervision. We got lucky. Judge gave him 10.
Well, that's what happens a lot, is that in every single case, the recommendation is life, but frequently the judge will give less than that, and how much less he wants to give is completely up to him.
Right.
But the recommendation, regardless on the PSI, is always life. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to mention was that you were talking before about how much pressure there is to put on people to take plea deals.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when I was talking to my lawyer, the way he put it to me was this. It only takes a jury deciding that one picture is of an underage child. It just takes one. And so all they have to do is go in front of a jury and just keep showing them pictures, one after another. Is this one child pornography? No, you don't think so? What about this one? So if you have, 500 pictures or whatever, they have 500 shots at convicting you. And any one conviction is enough. And not only that, but you're showing the jury all of your pornography, whatever it is, and however they react to that, that's going to affect your outcome. And so if you have any doubt at all about what's going to happen with that, you can kind of see how it might not be in your best interest to push things to that level. So, in my case, on my computer, there were a lot of, for example, remember how I told you that I had basically a trading post where people could upload anything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the people who came to that trading post uploaded a lot of stuff that wasn't child pornography. There was adult pornography, there was pictures of flowers, there was just corrupted files that were just meant to take up a lot of space and not do anything. And the police, all they did was they did a file search on a directory and used that number of files for what they convicted me of. But the thing was, there was no point in arguing because, the maximum, you get the full enhancement, I think it was at like 600 pictures. So if you have more than that, the fact that the rest, half of the rest of them are bogus, it makes you look bad to the judge, but there's no point in arguing it. And so they do all kinds of...
That's where a good defense comes into play. You have to have your own forensic tech that, shows your trail. Otherwise, the jury can be ignorant about these issues, and so can some judges. And then, you have to have your advocates all lined up, too. You can win, but they intimidated you by saying that's all they have to do is show them one picture.
Well, it's not
There's
just
another
that,
side to that.
What I mean is not so much. They could have found the number of pictures they needed to convict me of the highest enhancement. There was nothing that it was there. But what they did was they tacked on a bunch of extra stuff to make me look bad.
Yep.
And so I couldn't really argue the extra stuff because they were going to win anyway. The thing is that a lot of prosecutors use the spaghetti method. They can just throw stuff at you, and whatever sticks, sticks. There's no skin off their back if something doesn't work. And so, why not? Here in North Carolina, we had a really high-profile case called the Duke lacrosse case. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but what happened was basically there was somebody who wanted to run for political office. He was a prosecutor, and the place where he was running for political office had a lot of minority voters, and so he decided that he was going to try and get their support by prosecuting some rich white guys who went to Duke, and they were on the lacrosse team, the ultimate jocks. And it was an incredible case. The woman wasn't able to identify them in a lineup. They found evidence of semen on him from other guys, but not them. She was, a crack addict. The prosecutor actually, basically, instead of doing a regular lineup, he just held up a picture of the Duke lacrosse team and said, okay, which of these guys did it? There was photographic evidence from an ATM that some of the people that she accused of doing it were not even there. There were pictures of some of the guys who she accused looking at her in just absolute and total disgust, like they didn't want to have anything to do with her. And this nearly went to trial. This one prosecutor, for purely political reasons, nearly brought these, young men to trial based on complete fabrications. And the thing is, they were able to fight it and, won. But how terrifying that would be. And these people are wealthy. They have connections. They have the means to fight something like this.
It takes a lot of money, and that's another reason that people take plea deals. It's because the money to fight this is astronomical.
It is.
It really is.
My mom had to take out a mortgage on her house to pay for my court fees. It's amazing.
There are some good, court-appointed attorneys out there. There are, in some cases, some really good ones out there that are proactive on this and really know.
Here's the problem, though. A lot of people don't realize this. You don't, at least unless it's changed since I was doing it, you don't get appointed, a court-appointed attorney until, I think it's you plead, right, until it actually goes to trial. But a lot of the justice system comes before and after the trial.
Well, you'll sit in jail because of an animal sex tag before you even go to trial.
Right, and I did. Well, I pled guilty. So it was just, I pled guilty and I was gone. And I don't know if they had that tag when I was, when I caught my charge. But the thing is that things could have been worse for me. Like, in a lot of ways, I got lucky. And part of the reason for that was because I hired a lawyer, and he was able to negotiate with the prosecution before I even saw the judge. And basically, he was sort of able to present my side of things and convince them not to go as hard after me as they could have. And also, maybe just to negotiate so it wouldn't have to go to trial and, all that mess.
And then you have other prosecutors that don't even want to go do that. They're going to slam you as hard as they can slam you just because you didn't take the plea. That's what's going on with my nephew's case. Right. Well, the question here, though, was I would have gotten more time if I hadn't have taken the plea, but not that much more. Because basically what happened was that, like, for my crime, I triggered every enhancement that you can have that doesn't have anything to do with producing child pornography or physically hurting children. But when you have a crime where you get a 2-point enhancement for using a computer, it doesn't, it's not hard to go up above the statutory maximum for how much time you can get.
Dave, how much time were the guidelines? Did the judge come down?
He did, yeah.
He did.
So it happened this way.
That more and more, and this is just a little bit of encouragement. But
right.
It just seems as though the cases, the people that I'm talking to, they're going through this now, and have been through it in the past couple of years. A lot of times the judge has come down. My son's guideline for 11 years, and the judge came down to the 5.
Right. Well,
so,
from what I've read, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just, I mean, gosh, I don't know. It's no comfort because 5 years is still a very difficult time. It's still overblown. But I'm hoping that it's a sign of the times that the judges are starting to see what is going on here.
The judges, generally speaking, from what I've read, judges feel that the prison lengths for sentences tend to be too high, and generally speaking, and for sex offenses particularly. Judges generally do, as much as they feel they can get away with, go below the guidelines.
Yeah, I've read that. There was the percentage, I'm not sure, it was around 60, maybe a little over 60% of the judges felt this way.
I believe the survey that they did was 72% of the judges that disagreed with the sentencing guidelines for child pornography.
There you go. Thank you. When you were talking about molding the kids, you really kind of hit something, because I just could not help but wonder who is, okay, let's say it is not the FBI that was putting this out there to my son, and the particular site that he went to. The site that he went to was full of kids. Granted, they weren't they were gaming kids, and they were at a site they shouldn't have been, but they were there purely for gaming interaction, just to talk amongst themselves about gaming type stuff. But I was just wondering, these people are going on there, they're putting on these images, knowing that kids, that young boys, and I'm saying young boys, I'm probably 13 to 18 years old, are being exposed to this. I couldn't help but wonder, is that a way that they're conditioning them?
Yes, in the cases of a lot of the children that are caught up in this, especially the ones that are mentally young enough to not know. Yes. Think about that. You're deliberately going to a site. You are an FBI agent, okay? You're deliberately going to a site where you know that the majority of the users are children or people under the age of 25, okay? And what you're doing is you're taking songs that are on these sites and you're implanting them with pictures of child pornography. So you have become the first person to show this child pornography. The very agencies that pledge to protect them are the ones indoctrinating your child to child pornography. And I put it indoctrinating because in the special needs children that are caught up in this, or the special needs adults, okay, there's heightened sensitivity disorder, okay, that comes along under the spectrum disorder of things. You know, these are the kids that don't like to be touched, or they're visually stimulated by what they see. You know, you have netted these guppies. This is what you're doing. So in the name of protecting children, not only are you taking material of explicit child pornography, but you're publicly placing it on sites with no safety net whatsoever to protect other children from being infected with that initial stimulation of the child pornography. Isn't that ludicrous? But that's exactly what's happening.
You also have to look at the media. I mean, this goes beyond FBI. This goes to bigger picture. It's every single media outlet is molding these kids' opinions and taste buds.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we have, you know, something we always point out, back in the early 80s, there was about 50 different companies that produced TV shows, movies, magazines, media. Cut to today, they've been consolidated into about 6 major corporations. And these 6 corporations decide what, you know, we see on TV, what we hear on the radio, what we read in the newspaper, what we read on your online magazine. These 6 companies control essentially 99% of the media, except for outlets like this. Blog
and then
Talk,
let's look at who those companies
podcast.
lobby in Congress.
But I had a listener that had a question for David, and I've postponed asking for him for a moment. It's not a real heavy question. But earlier in the show, you had mentioned that when you want a device, you have to pay an additional $35, $40 to use it.
Correct.
Where does that money
per month?
Per month. Where does that money go?
It goes to a outside contractor who basically specializes in cases like this where they monitor people's computers.
Okay.
So there's new business springing up.
Oh, speaking of which, one of the other things I wanted to mention was that the current federal child pornography laws were written by prosecutorial lawyers and passed as a part of a larger bill without any debate at all.
Yep.
That was one of the things that really stuck out for me, because during my judge's sentencing, he said something to he told both lawyers for the prosecution and defense, I would have presented the case exactly the way you did. But, you know, he said something to the effect of, I feel like I should stay close to the guidelines because, you know, Congress has access to experts and data and statistics that we don't have that go into these laws, and that, you know, that should have some weight, you know, in the sentencing. And it's not true. None of it's true. Like, Congress, you know, there's no studies at all. There's an incredibly surprising lack of studies about, like, all of these issues.
You're right.
Well,
One of the congressmen that we contacted didn't know.
They used the Butner report as their evidence to create these laws, and the Butner report is a fluke.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you something. I was at Butner.
Yeah, you were. Oh, my goodness. You're the second person I've met.
Okay, now, I knew people who were in the sex offender program before the Adam Walsh law. Here's what happened. I think I want to say it was called the STEP program, but I'm not positive. There was a sex offender program there that was completely voluntary and had no benefit at all. You didn't get a time cut. You didn't get, so much as a letter of recommendation to your probation officer. It was just for people who wanted help, to go and try and deal with their issues. So when people went there, they were basically pressured to say that they had done things that they hadn't done. Say, well, I know you did this, but you probably also did that too. And if they wouldn't, say that they had done these other things, then they were expelled from the program based on the assumption that they were lying and that they were blocking the recovery effort.
That's what I mean by padding the numbers of the statistics.
It's worse than that. Now, so when the Adam Walsh law came about, the guy who, like the head of that complex, basically the guy who was running that medical program, went to Congress.
Fernandez?
And he used the things that the people had told him in confidence to try and get better and, to change their lives as an excuse for committing them.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a minute.
So basically you're using a one-sided source of information because you've already nullified the testimony of others or forced them into it to go ahead and write up this wonderful article and to enact these laws. Because
and then you punish the people who came to you for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's wrong on so many levels. The thing they do is, if they decide to get somebody with the Adam Walsh law, they wait until after they have served their sentence. That is, if they're considered to be criminally dangerous, but there is no attempt to rehabilitate them or to remove them from the general prison population until after they have already served their sentence. Like,
well,
literally,
they're even trying to get guys out on parole when you want a parole out of North Carolina federal prison and you're sitting there before your court date. You want to parole out, then you've got to parole out with conditions of the Adam Walsh release.
Are you sure you're talking about federal prison? I don't think federal prison has parole. They have
well, while you're sitting,
time.
before you go to your court date, while you're in jail, if you want to parole out, they want to get you out of there before your court date. You're guilty until proven innocent because you still have to apply for certain conditions under the Adam Walsh Act. Okay, so here you are. You haven't even been convicted yet. But if you want out of the custody that you're in, you have to do this under certain conditions of the Adam Walsh Act.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I heard you talking about that before, and it shocked me. I didn't know any of that.
No, we have a friend that's still sitting in jail, I believe, that was one of the things that they had brought up, that if he wanted to be allowed to go home, that he had to go home under conditions of the Adam Walsh Act.
Oh.
So in Andrew's case, you pay a high bail, $50,000 cash bail, okay? But like I said, states vary. The Adam Walsh Act is not in every state, thank God, okay? But, you got to look at how you get those laws, and you brought up a good point about the testimony given to the Congress and people and JOD by the people that write them up. Okay, that's something else that needs to look, a little closer eyeball on. But then you also have to look at the people that, Megan's Law and the Adam Walsh Act and these different acts that are in different states, and there's just as many in different states, people. They're just called different things. You got to look at what enacted that brought them to come into play, That also leads to educating the public properly. Because if I say you're a sex offender, most people are going to say, hang ya, okay? They don't care. How do you make them want to care? How do you make every single state in the union and every parent and everybody out there want to care? Because you don't want to put people and ruin people's lives that just happen to click on something. You don't want to do that. So how do you educate a society when you've got a government that's not doing that? You know?
Yeah. So several things. The first thing I want to mention was, by the way, when I was talking about Butner and, you know, the Adam Walsh Law and all that stuff, I don't want people to think that it's just, you know, some inmate told me this and who knows, he could have been making it up. There was somebody, we had a psychiatrist come over from the complex who had worked in that program for the purpose of evaluating the sort of criminality, I guess, of the people who were there, using both a kind of a survey and, you know, speaking with them individually. And when I found out that she had come from that program, I asked her, I said, you know, this is what this guy told me. Is that all true? And she said, you know, for legal reasons, I can't talk about that. But I don't see why anybody would ever want to go into this program. That's what she said to me.
And we had one similar to that up here in Alaska. It was a psychiatrist that believed that he could tell if somebody had sexual intent by some test that he invented. You know, eventually the guy quit working with children offenders up here. But, you know, it depends on what the people are told that go ahead and say, yeah, that guy can have the Medicaid waiver to work with these kind of individual special needs kids that may have sexual tendencies. He can tell us in advance if they're going to. You know, the guy turned out to be a quack, mind you. But, you know, he was practicing this for several years before he was, you know, discovered to be a quack, and that there was nothing to it. So you got to look at what's presented to the people that go ahead and enact these, or to put them on ballots, or that help vote them in. You got to take it to a higher level, and then you damn best better be able to explain it. And like I said, most people, when they hear technical terms for things, hear wah wah, you know.
Right.
So you got to not only explain it, you got to explain it on an elementary level so anybody can understand it and what it really means.
It isn't even really about explanations. I mean, the thing.
The
characteristic of these kinds of crimes is that they provoke very strong emotional reactions. Mm-hmm. And emotions are the antithesis of reason. Like, people cannot rationally, you know, unspool these kinds of arguments and sort of moral debates when they're terrified for their kids.
And most people don't even know it exists until it happens to little Johnny.
Right. That's the thing, is that you don't think it can happen to you until it happens to you or somebody you love. You know, my grandmother is very conservative. She was a farmer's wife, salt of the earth, you know, fits almost every stereotype. When my mom told her what had happened to me, the first thing she said was, I didn't even know that was a crime.
I didn't even know that was a crime. I think most people fall into that boat, especially when you look at the fine lines that are given in everyday life. You know, the Miley Cyrus's, the shows. I've turned on just regular TV, not even cable, and saw something that, you know, that I was shocked at. I remember when they couldn't show the bathroom on I Love Lucy show. Okay, so you have one generation that grew up with the bathroom not being allowed to be shown on I Love Lucy, and the next generation clicks on, you've got Miley Cyrus wearing this beach bathing suit that makes her look nude, grinding up on stage. You know, so then you get into that whole morality thing of whose responsibility is it to teach. You know, when the kid turns on the Miley Cyrus thing, most of us moms go in the kitchen and bake cookies. We don't want to hear that, you know. So you get into a generation gap, and you get into whose responsibility is it. You know, that is a big thing. Is, you know, that's why I asked you, did you know it was wrong? I want to take that a step further. Did you know it was wrong because you knew it was naked people? It was porn, you know, or did you, with your first initial porn hunt, you know, was there any kind of feeling of this is wrong from you for the first one, not the child porn, but the first initial looking at porn? And did you think you were alone and that would never lead to anything? I mean, tell me your state as a child involved in this, as a high school kid.
Okay. So I'll try and, take the pieces apart and look at that. I don't know. I was a hornball. And I was always shy around women. And, I didn't know how to start that relationship. And so I turned to porn instead because it was, less dangerous, I guess, to me, in a way, because you didn't have to worry about being rejected. It wasn't maybe emotionally fulfilling, but it was, to a degree sexually fulfilling. And I guess that's better than nothing.
Did you feel wrong about the initial hunt?
I felt a bit of shame, I guess, and a bit of embarrassment, because it is kind of a taboo thing. I mean, even we talk about, how sexualized everything is, but it's kind of like we have interesting lines about what is considered acceptable sexuality and what is not. And so it's sort of like if you see, Miley Cyrus grinding on, some award ceremony, that's just her being Miley Cyrus. But if you watch two people having sex, then you're some kind of pervert and freak. And so it's sort of like we have a real dichotomy in America where on the one hand we are disgusted by and, sort of look down upon, people who have, an interest in human sexuality, who are, admit to being, attracted to porn and other things like that. But on the other hand, we completely fetishize, youth and beauty and sexuality, everywhere you turn. And there is a kind of hypocrisy to that, where, on the one hand, you're going to wag your finger at somebody who looks at porn, whether they're addicted or, just want, whatever, just killing time. Somebody showed them something, who knows. You wag your finger at them and you say, oh, there's something wrong with you for this interest. But then you have, not just celebrities, but all kinds of people, in commercials and everything else selling sex. And people don't see a relationship between those two things. I guess there are many ways that people sell human sexuality, right or wrong, whether you hate it, whether you love it, whatever. It's all over the place, And so where is the line between sexual freedom and abuse and use and manipulation? And I think that's something that our society really struggles with.
We do. I can remember being ostracized for a pair of hot pants. I thought they were great. My parental units around me thought that was just terrible. That's nothing compared to today,
Right, yeah. Today you would be kind of tame.
Oh, yeah. And whose responsibility is it to teach it, If you're a good, honest American, hardworking citizen, you send your kids to school, you send them to church, you take them to soccer practice, you buy them all the latest devices. But there's a mixed message to the kids out there, a very mixed message. Parents are old and we're not going to listen to what they say. Oh, my girlfriends are looking at this side, I'm going to go there. Oh, my girlfriends are wearing makeup at this age, I'm going to do that. Only today's kids have a lot more problems they can get into than we did wearing hot pants and got suspended,
Right.
It's a different world out there. And so you've got to look at, if they're going to prosecute the kids for this, for sometimes what is a natural especially if you're an awkward kid or a Down syndrome kid or an Asperger's. If you're one of those kids, 9 times out of 10, your parents didn't even talk to you about sex. There's a famous case we posted in my nephew's room about a 15-year-old autistic girl who got pregnant by one of Dad's friends, and they kept trying to ask her about sex. The girl had never even learned about sex. They had to explain to her what it was. So she didn't know, and that's kind of the thing that I get at. We have a hard enough time explaining sex. How do you explain the Internet laws, what porn is? Where's that fine line between porn and art? Where's that fine line between child pornography and adult pornography?
Right.
How do you
especially when you get into especially when you get into things like, the child doesn't have to be naked.
Exactly, they don't.
So if you if you have a child in a bathing suit, the difference between a devoted parent and a deviant, pornographer is whether or not a jury thinks that there is something sexual about the pose. That's
Look
a
at the
mighty
Walmart
fine
couple.
line.
The Walmart couple that took their film in to be developed at Walmart, and there was little girls in the bathtub, and one of the little girls was kissing Daddy as he's washing her. Okay, the couple eventually ended up being deported. They were, deportable, but they made a huge case out of that. To them, that was child pornography. Okay, I've got a picture of my son on a bearskin rug, naked on a bearskin rug when he was born. Okay, is that pornography? There have been couples that have been arrested for these films. Little
and it
Johnny
just depends on the jury.
Yes, it does.
You don't know what is child pornography and what is not until you're in front of a jury. That's when you know.
If adults don't know, how the heck are the kids going to know?
Yeah.
I think that what needs to happen is the ladies from Caution Click can tell you more about it. I like the direction that they're headed with, trying to beat it at a higher level and make people understand about what the sex tag reform should be about. You ladies want to talk about that?
They could be gone.
Oh.
They might be gone.
Rita? Yeah.
Yeah, Rita had to drop out. Margie dropped out a while ago, and Margie.
Well, they run Caution Click, and they've been
Esther, Margie, Rita.
Can I go on a brief rant about the prison system in general?
Oh yes,
sure.
This is an often quoted statistic, but I'm going to quote it again. America has the most people in prison and who have criminal records of any country in the world, both in terms of percentage of the population and raw numbers. We have more prisoners than China. We have more prisoners than Pakistan. We have more prisoners than England, our friends, our allies. Nobody has more prisoners than we do.
Now, why is that?
Well, the money is an issue, and also I think that we have a mentality in America where if there is a societal ill, we'll cure it with prison. We did it with prohibition. We're doing it with drugs. We're doing it with child pornography. There's just this feeling that if we just put enough of the bad people in prison, only the good people will be left and everything will be hunky-dory.
And isn't that a fairy tale? We've proven with statistics that none of it works, none of it whatsoever. The war on drugs, okay, when you've got the CIA bringing in the drugs,
Right. Well, prohibition was a complete failure. It created the mob in America. We ended up having to legalize it because it was destroying the country. And then the war on drugs. This is the war on pornography now. It's the
war
same
on
kind
America's youth is what it is. You want to talk about indoctrination. Okay, if you're not even going to teach it in the schools, and most parents, in the little hick town of, Sullivan, Missouri, they go to church on Sunday and they don't talk to their kids about these things.
But
they will
it's the same thing with drugs,
devices.
though. It's the same as with the drugs. Like,
it is.
You know, they've put an awful lot of children in prison over drugs. Right? I mean, it's the same kind of mentality. You know,
it is.
We have go ahead.
Well, it just brought a thought to my mind when I was younger, and I grew up in the 70s, and my father sits down and he tries to talk to me about drugs. There was not a more awkward conversation between us because he had no clue. You know, he just knew it was his parental duty to talk to me about drugs, but he had no real idea on what was going on or what to say. And I think this is happening now with parents and sex education and what is going out there, such as the child pornography and the sexting and everything else. Parents really have no clue what is going on. They don't understand the culture, this counterculture that the kids are finding on the internet.
Right.
And so they don't know how to discuss it with them. You know, they don't know how to talk or what to talk about. They don't even know how to bring it up. They don't know what points to make. The war on drugs is winding down. It just worries me that they're just going to be using sex offenders to fill those prison beds.
I think so. But I wanted to address what you just said about, you know, how kids get into things and they don't know any better and so on. You remember I was talking about that case with the 17-year-old boy, the 16-year-old boy, and his 14-year-old girlfriend?
Mm-hmm.
Right. When she was quoted after, you know, that happened. They said, you know, what was going on? Why did you do this? It was so dumb, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, she said, you know, we're teenagers. We do stupid things.
Yep.
And, you know,
children
it's true.
think with erasers at the end of their pencils.
You know,
made a mistake. I can erase it.
You know, no matter how good a parent you are, you can be the best mother in the world, have the best parents, have a good, you know, wholesome family, everything else you can want, a great school system. Kids are still going to do stupid things because they're kids. And it used to be in America that there was a recognition of that in law, that, you know, we understood that, you know, teenagers would make mistakes and, you know, depending on what it was, they should be punished, but with the understanding that they're teenagers and they're going to do stupid things. And it seems like the legal system has almost completely forgotten that.
I think the legal system deliberately forgot that.
There was a point when the police officer would take you home to your parents. You know, when you were caught out in curfew, you were whatever little minor infraction you were out there doing. They would take you home to mom and dad, but not anymore. Now it's straight.
No, they're targeting
jail.
them. They took the time and waited till Andrew was 18 before they prosecuted, and they do this in most of the cases of the children in the sting. Okay, they wait until after.
They did that with my son as well. As soon as they saw that the activity wasn't happening anymore, he was quit going there, quit downloading it, quit doing it. He kind of wakes up. You know, he starts to mature. He starts to wake up, and he starts saying, "Boy, this is really stupid," and he quits the activity. Well, after he quits the activity, they're realizing that they're not going to get him any more images on or enhancements or anything else out of him. They come get him. He asked me, he said, well, why didn't they come earlier when I first got into it? You know, if they really cared, why didn't they come when I very first downloaded something? And
that's
you
what
know,
made me look at the money end of it.
Yes, I think that they were just waiting to see where his activity was going to go, waiting for the enhancements, waiting for the images to pile up so that they could have a much better case.
There were several, you're absolutely right, and that's what I found. I looked for consistencies in all the cases that started hitting after Andrew's video came out, and we started getting hit with a flood of people, you know. I don't want to talk about it live or anything, and I don't want to tell you my name, but let me tell you what happened to my kids. So I started documenting the different types of things, and I started looking for common threads. Okay, was this child a special needs child? Was there any education in the schools? how long did they wait from the time the child hit the link before they raided the home, then how long did they wait until they arrested the child. I found that they usually, in the majority of the cases, and I think it's like 92% of them, and I've looked at over 400, so in 92% of the cases, when it was a child, a person under the age of 18, okay, it can be 17, like I said, the youngest that we've ever documented was 11, they will wait until that child turns 18. It immediately after you're picked up for these charges, it goes out on CaseNet and other things around, depending on your state that you're in. They never say that this person hit this, almost 2 years ago when they were a teenager or anything like that. That made me look at why. Why is that done that way? Okay, these are kids, and 9 times out of 10 you're sticking them in adult federal court, and you can defend that and say they were a child at the time. So let me look at the ones that went to the federal court stage. And when I looked at those cases, what I found was a consistent thread of them not only waiting, okay, but by the time this person gets to court, they're no longer a child. They're 18 years of age, and the adult side of things kicks in there. Okay, there's only one case I saw that was, and this turned out to be the 11-year-old now, is going through a juvenile court on this. Okay? So I looked at the money. Okay, and let me follow another trail here. Okay, I'm seeing too many consistencies. So let's see where they all lead. Let's see what the bottom line is. I wanted to look at the plea deals. Some of these kids had minimal amounts. Like Andrew has 2 clicks on the same link, same video link. And forensics can show you how long he looked at that link. That's where knowing a good forensic tech to go to court comes in handy. So let me look at this real close. How many of these kids were forced to take pleas, and let me find out the reasons why. Okay, beans are all going to hit me up, so let me go ahead and look at that. 96% of the cases were forced to take pleas. What I mean by forced is we'll use the example of the kid 1 county over from where Andrew is. He had his computer stored in the basement. They went to his mom's house after he got the computer back and hooked it up. Okay, pull the kid in. Tell the kid if he passes a lie detector test that proves that the computer was at the friend's house and stuff, to go ahead and let him go. Kid passes the test. Okay, the federal agent involved is the one that said, no, you don't cop to this, I'm going to go ahead and take your mom in. Okay, they're allowed to do this, people. They do that all the time. But I wanted to know what was the emphasis on plea deals. What does the plea mean? In all of the plea cases, there was probation, but the sex tag, okay? And in some cases, it would be a minimal of 5 years, but the sex tag for multiple pictures, or if you passed it, this thing, okay? The prosecuting attorney is not going to stand up there and tell the judge, here's how exactly we did the sting. We put this song, this picture right here, this naked girl, we put this on the Cindy Loeffner Girls Just Want to Have Fun video, and we went after anybody that hit it. There's such a thing called oversight, okay? That was never and has never really been addressed on how you protect the ones, the innocent people. You're running a sting. You're going to a site that you know that, yes, some child porn people trading that go there. But there's also a huge population of people trading games, pictures and recipes, and all kinds of other stuff. And you're going to place this picture of child porn with its missing and exploited child tag so you can track it. You can track the IPs off of anybody that hits it on that site, that public site. You're not going to give any warning, and anybody that hits it is guilty. Anybody that hits it, you're guilty. If you click it by mistake, you are now guilty of possession of child pornography. Okay? The oversight on this. Why wasn't there oversight? Well, let me look into what it generates. We're not talking about 1 or 2 kids in every state. We're talking about hundreds of kids in every state, thousands of kids sitting in jail. That doesn't even count the adults. That's just the kids or people that hit it when they were a kid. And if we have that kind of percentage rate of them wanting them to take plea deals, you can't help but look at why and what does it generate. I grew up, if you want to get to the root of anything, you follow the money. That's why I had you explain what prison was like, what it cost. We haven't even gotten into what phone calls cost at prison or the North Carolina wanting to charge them for their food and medication, let's follow the money just on a legal standpoint.
Remind me to address that later.
Okay.
You can address it now.
What it gets down to is, I feel, in my honest opinion, that it was a deliberate setup of America. That we have more private prisons than we should. We have a lot of government officials and celebrity officials who don't stock in the private prison, to include members of the Catholic Church. Okay, so let's look at the prisons that don't stay full. Let's look at some good, honest police from time to time say, I'm not going to go arrest that kid. Are you kidding? That kid's a Downs kid. Let's look at what happened to the cop for not doing it.
They get $160 from me every month. That's how much I send my son for commissary, $40. What does that break down to? $40 a week. That he
you look at the number of people imprisoned. You look at for how many people are there for heinous crimes or crimes where they're victimless crimes, and then you look at the numbers. Get into what it costs for prison. Go ahead, David.
So, all right, my county jail, I was there for a year. I would call my dad, I think, like twice a week for about 10 minutes each call. By the end of the year, it ended up being about $1,400.
Now break it down for me.
I don't remember the exact totals. I'd have to go back and do the math, but it was more than your average, sex hotline charge per minute.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was obscene. And then the prison I was at Butner, when I was leaving, they were just starting something where if you got a write-up, they could take some of your money. Like if a CEO found contraband or said they found contraband or did anything, and you got a shot, they could just take money out of your commissary. And two things you understand. First is, I mean, how do you fight that if you're a prisoner, right? I mean, what do you do if you didn't actually have contraband? Secondly, there are so many rules in prison. Like, I have literally never met anybody in prison, including the COs, who actually knew all the rules. I remember I had a friend, he pissed off a CO or something, his locker got searched, and a lot of his stuff got taken, which, by the way, they're supposed to give you the option to send home, but they usually don't. And so he was upset, and he said, you know what, from now on, I'm going to make sure I don't have any contraband. And I said, really? You don't have any contraband? And he said, no, not even a little. And I said, okay. I said, do you have more than, I think it was 5 books? No. Okay. Is your locker neatly organized? Yes. Okay, do you have any magazines that are more than 2 weeks old? Well, yeah, but I have magazines that are more than 2 weeks old, but that's not contraband. Yes, it is. That is contraband. Mm-hmm. The theory in prison is that anytime anything ever goes wrong, we're just going to make a rule to make it, against it, so that if we can stop it whenever we want to. Right?
They will do. And
look at some of the labor that's done in prison.
I don't believe there's a U.S. citizen that is not immune to some kind of persecution. If they want you, they will get you.
Well, that's the really scary part about the laws that were just passed when you're dealing with the NSA and you're dealing with the Patriot Act and a few indefinite detention. When you're looking at that is a mechanism.
I just had to jump in. I wanted to let you guys know we have about 2 minutes left, and the show's going to end. We can't. It cuts off at that time. I have no control over it, so we're probably going to have to wrap it up. And I wanted to say thank you again to everybody who called in and spoke and gave testimonials tonight that is no longer on the line. Thank you to the caller and the 215 area code for sharing your story. Thank you to David That was very brave to come on and talk with us about this stuff, and to Kitty for everything you've done and getting this whole ball rolling. And
Jackie.
Sorry?
And Jackie.
Jackie. Okay.
Oh,
your name's Jackie?
Yeah, that's me.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. And Jackie. Yeah, and thank you to all the listeners out there. And
When's
before
your
we
Florida
go,
show with the Florida Sting Boys?
that's next Friday night, February 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be joined by Chris and Trey from Florida talking about the sting operations going down there. They've both been caught up in that. And is there any websites you guys wanted to throw out there before they cut us off here?
Govern us.
What's that?
Well, Govern Us is a Florida a website set up for the Florida Sting. Dave, are you
and other stings and other sting victims? It's dealing with the soldier stings. Like I said, there's many.
Please do go check it out. And Dave, are you working with any groups right now?
Not at the moment. There's a fellow named Wayne Bowers who sends out an email list of current events as deals with sex offenders.
Yeah,
so that's
Dwayne's
how I
awesome.
found out about this podcast.
Oh,
Dwayne's awesome. Hit me up online, David. I'm Kitty Wolf on Facebook.
I can't use Facebook. It's a
Is
felony.
there any way we can keep in contact with you, Dave?